Welcome to What If I Don't Like It? I'm your host, KT Baldessaro, and this episode we're talking to cinephile, actor, and fellow TikToker Brandon White about the 1996 comedy Christmas classic, Jingle All the Way. Welcome to episode 17. We are joined by a friend of mine who I have met on TikTok named Brandon White for his first time on the episode and our first time featuring someone that I've met online through doing film critiques and just getting involved in the film talk community. We're talking about a Christmas movie we talked about it in July, so Christmas in July, even though this is coming out on August 1st. I'm not typically into Christmas movies, and I will admit that when I spoke to Brandon and he threw this movie out there, I had seen it already. I didn't entirely care for it all that much, but I love the idea of okay, let's talk Christmas movies. Let's talk this movie. Let's see what is going in here, because this is definitely a movie that is in the zeitgeist. This is definitely a movie that people at least know of, whether or not they've seen it. It is one of the few Arnold Schwarzenegger straight comedic films. There's about 7 of them. If you start to really look at his body of work, you'll see there's 50 films, and Kindergarten Cop, this, Last Action Hero, Twins, stuff like that. So it's definitely something that you want to take a closer look at and see, maybe I missed something here. Maybe there is more than meets the eye. And I'm really glad that we did, because we got into a lot of really interesting things in this conversation. We talked about the rating system, and if you're really interested in that, I've done a small, what they call documentary on my TikTok account. Again, if you don't know, I'm at Movie Runtime on TikTok. I'm also at Movie Runtime on YouTube. I am, however, Little Deadly Creature on Instagram, so if you do put in at Movie Runtime on Instagram, you'll get my backup account that'll bring you to my Instagram account. But anyway, I digress. The documentary is on both Instagram and TikTok. I talk about the history of the MPAA rating system post Hays Code. There's a wonderful documentary on the Hays Code by Lobby Intros, or Harry at Intro at the Lobbies. I definitely check that out. I'm going to put that in the liner notes too. And so this movie, is it rated the correct thing? Is it for children? All of that gets unpacked. We talk about even just the depiction of children in films, because that's something that Brandon really struggles with, particularly with this director. Then we talk about, how you can't really create art in a vacuum. You can have what you intend for a piece of art to mean or be about as a writer, and then often you give that away. You're not on set with those people. Even as a director, once you let something go, the audience is going to bring their own interpretations and experiences to that, and how that can affect the success or enjoyability of a film. Brandon is available on TikTok, on Letterboxd, and on Instagram as well. And if you go to our liner notes, you'll be able to find that, get directly on that. I definitely suggest following him. We talk about how he is also an aspiring actor, and it's really fun for me to get to talk to other people who are in that kind of line of work. And when you watch a film, that's the viewpoint you're watching that film from. So it's definitely important to note, and it definitely adds a certain flavor to the conversation. So, guys, I hope you enjoy that as well. Just a little bit of bookkeeping here before we get to the start of the show. I may have overdone it this month, and I was on a lot of podcasts, but that means that there's a lot of different ways to engage with some of the content that I've put out there, and I'm just really excited to get to meet all of these new people. And so, when people ask me, hey, do you want to come on the show and talk about movies, Lord knows I can't say no. And so on the 15th of last month, I was on Letterhack, and we just did a basic nice to meet you interview. So it was really fun. If you want to get to know more about me, I definitely suggest checking that out. And I really suggest checking out the Letterhack, who is Matt Strackbine. So much wonderful content. I was part of a week of kind of lighter content. He does a lot of political content, activist content. His channel is dedicated to getting people who may not really be in the main limelight of news and giving them a platform. He also draws them, which is really, really fun. You get a live drawing while you're being interviewed. Super amazing. And the week that we did was kind of moving away from politics. As you know, I'm a movie critic and a filmmaker. I'm not a very political person. So it was more of a like, hey, politics are insane. It was just shortly after the assassination attempt. Let's take a light look at movies and books and fun things, the kind of news you need now. I was also on Look Back Cinema with Zoe Richardson on the 22nd, and we did a whole really long, really fun deep dive into RoboCop, which is a movie I absolutely adore. If you want to do some deep diving into that, I highly encourage you to check it out. Look Back Cinema with Zoe has tons of really fun and interesting older movies that they're going through, classics if you like 80s and 90s cinema. Check that out. I have also been participating with Movie Night Extravaganza on some really wonderful episodes that I am truly honored to get to be part of. Recently, we talked to the director and writer of Repo Man, Sid and Nancy and Walker, about just, what it was like to work on those films, and then also his latest movie, which is called My Last Movie, so presumably it's his last movie, which is going to be a Western interpretation of Gogol's Dead Souls. And as a Russian language and literature major, oh my God, that was incredibly fascinating to get to talk to him about it. It's a wonderful conversation. It is linked in my bio. It is very easy to find on YouTube. Just go to Movie Night Extravaganza. Then I also got to join them to talk to Mike Morawski, who is a senior VFX editor, worked specifically with Massive on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And oh my God, I am beside myself to get to just hang out with someone so easy to talk to as they talk about things like, oh, when I was talking to Peter Jackson, or oh, when I was directing Vigo. What a cool guy. What fascinating stories. I can't suggest enough to go check that episode out. It just came out. It's very easy to find. I will also be on one more episode, which is coming out tomorrow because it's going to be the second. This is the first. So on Friday, we'll be doing another Lord of the Rings episode because we're tackling all 3 movies at once. We just did the technical aspects of it with Mike, and now we're going to talk about the narrative and acting and story aspects of it with Renee Roon of The Night Shift, and I also get to take part in that, which is really just super fun. I love these movies. I love that group of people. I am truly so blessed to get to do this. Without any further digression, talking about shows that aren't this show right now. Sorry about that, guys. We're going to get into this show, and I really want to stress, for a movie that I was not interested in talking about, that I might struggle to find aspects to get us interested in, I have to say, I was wrong. We wound up having a lot to talk about, and this movie has a lot of layers to it. So jump on in and enjoy the conversation.
Password. Jingle bells. Batman smells.
Welcome to episode number 17. Wow, we're getting up there. We are doing our first ever Christmassy special with Jingle All the Way, and we are joined by a friend of mine who's kind of a new friend of mine, Brandon from TikTok. I mean, actually, I don't even know your last name. Do you want to tell people your last name? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Oh, no, it's fine. My last name is White, like the color.
Nice. All right. Well, Brandon, I've met you on TikTok from, I guess, Film Talk community, and then also the Real Cinephiles server is also how I met you, and doing Movie Mondays and things like that.
Yeah, that's correct. And I've been following your TikTok page even before you came into the Cinephile server, and I was really liked how you do your content. So I was like, of course I was gonna follow someone that has an interest in my eye.
Thank you. I also love following your account because you're not just movies. You also do a lot of music reviews, and I don't really have a lot of depth and knowledge in music, so it's very fun for me to sit down and be like, oh, this is totally new to me. Let's listen.
Yeah, no, it's I always try to listen and watch as many different things as I can. So at least with something like music, I could try to listen to a lot of different music while I'm at work, where I'm allowed to listen to music. And then as for movies, I'll just watch something always different, once per day, just because I just putting a lot of variety into my, I guess, cinephile perspective and vision, all that stuff.
Yeah. I think people misunderstand or just don't even give enough value to the soundtrack in a movie, or even
Yes.
when movies choose to be silent as well.
Yeah, cause like, I remember, like, when I was, like, young, like, sometimes there are some soundtracks that stick out to me.
Mhm.
Like, when I was young, I grew up with, like, Wallace and Gromit. I've always known
Oh,
that
yeah.
theme song stuck in my head,
Yeah.
or, like, Lilo and Stitch with the Hawaiian music that always sticks out to me, and also some, like, moments in movies where it has, like, a very choiric, feel to it that
Mhm.
that just really just rings so well to my ears that, like, keeps me intrigued over what the movie is doing.
Oh my god, absolutely. I think a incredible example of that would be any of the Star Wars. I mean, who amongst
Yes,
us can't hum or sing multiple songs from different sequences in that movie and doesn't like you can't even take out a lightsaber without needing the additional music to feel the whole scene when you're reenacting it.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if people wanted to follow you on TikTok, I mean, this is of course going to be in the liner notes, but say you're just listening, what is your handle?
So my TikTok is lamphead97. You can follow me on there where I do
Mhm.
just like she said, like movies, music reviews. Or you can follow me on Instagram at branddoggedwhite, where I just do again TikTok content, but also just some personal posts,
Mhm.
just get a little bit of me, or on Letterboxd, which is just Lamphead, where I just do my written reviews there in case you guys want to have some like I don't know, like early access to my reviews because that's usually where I post my reviews first.
Yes. That is exactly how my letterbox works too. Like, I'll do the whole write up and then I'm gonna record something based on that flavor of that review, but that review is gonna go out maybe 24 hours before I tape something. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for me it's either like 24 hours or just like months because
Oh,
I'm always
wow!
behind. Yeah, because I'm behind on my reviews. So I was like, oh, oh no, I
Oh,
gotta
wow.
like do this review for this movie I watched like a few months ago, but
Oh, yeah.
you
That does
know,
happen.
they're like the never, as I always say.
Yeah, sometimes there are some movies where it's not really in the zeitgeist. I've just watched it for myself. I can throw out a review whenever I want, and I
Mhm.
will admit, I call those like sick day ones when I need to save something up because I need to post something today, but like, oh my god,
Yeah.
I've fallen behind because content creation is a kind of thing that can burn you out from time to time as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And if there's like times where I'm just like, oh, I'm not able to make content, it's fine. I don't really feel like obligated to like, oh, I need to post something for today because
Mhm.
like just for my followers. No, I'm pretty sure like the followers that true followers that will stay for my TikTok are the ones that are gonna keep watching my videos no matter how long until I
Mhm.
was like, okay, I'm gonna post this on this day now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty true. And I think that the format rewarded on Letterbox versus the format rewarded on TikTok is vastly different. Like I
Hmm.
love to read a well thought out multiple paragraph what is considered long for Letterbox, but it's like half a
Yeah.
page when you type it out on like an 8 by 11. Because I really want to see
Hmm.
what people think about the film, and some people have a very good written style versus their spoken style, and everything is so much punchier on TikTok. So I sometimes will go to TikTok for like I just want to basically know the flavor of something, and then I go to Litterbox to see like what is the minutia that people are talking about.
Mhm, exactly. Cause like, when I do Letterboxd before, like, they had the whole 3-minute limit on TikTok, I was, like, really diving into films, analyzing them, really
Mhm.
tried to, like, understand what it was trying to go for and dive into at least almost every single aspect of it that is worth talking about, and so, when they had the 3-minute limit ordeal, like, I had to like limit it out a little bit on my written reviews, but also still get the main point across, just not too much dive into an
Mhm.
analytical mindset. But now since TikTok has a 10-minute limit, I'm just like, oh, it's free real estate.
Yes. And I actually only joined TikTok in January of this year, 2024,
Hmm.
because I'm a little older and I just didn't really TikTok before that. So I never TikToked under the 3-minute rule, and I swear to God, when people talk about it, it makes me want to punch a wall. Like I need the 10 minutes because I do multiple takes. And I would have to keep
Mhm.
stopping and doing a new, like, because I want to feel it out. And then I usually pick one. I do a one take. I don't like to edit too hard, but I need that space for like take one and two and three. And you fuckers would make me have to do it all in one go under one edit. Like, oh, what a hellscape! Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, yeah, despite the fact there's the 3-minute limit, it does kinda, like, in a way, you do have to, like, really think into inside the box, and you have to, like,
Mhm,
figure out, like, okay, what do you wanna say? What you wanna say but can't, but it's okay, but
mhm,
also just, like, as a way as a beginner's class or guide to editing your video to make it seem like, okay, you seem like professional, talk about what you want to talk
mhm,
about. And that's just something that's really interesting too, at least like for TikTok, because I know, at least with like trying build your influencer, your social media platform, something like that. TikTok will be an interesting way because you have to edit your videos out,
mhm.
and it's like does a pretty like simple job of doing it. Whereas if you go to something like YouTube, there's a whole like
Ooh,
complex editing process to do it. At least I feel like.
yeah,
So I feel like with TikTok, it does like give you some like leeway into it. Even though like there's some issues I have with TikTok, but
of
like
course.
who doesn't?
Of course. There's some issues I have with every single platform I use, like, 90 seconds on Reels is too short. Get away from me. I need at least 2 minutes, Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So, I mean, each platform is gonna be slightly different, and then we all know that Facebook sucks the most.
hmm I rarely use Facebook.
No, me too. But, but back when Facebook first came out and it was called the Facebook, boy, did I use it all the time, so things will always ebb and flow, and God forbid they actually ban it in September in the United States. Boy, will we all move over to Instagram and be fine with 90 seconds.
Like Facebook, like I remember using it like when I was back in middle school, and I'm always just like, "Oh, this is like so cool. Get to see like how friends are doing and all that
Mhm,
stuff." I didn't really interact too much on Facebook, but I was just like the type of person that's just like, "Oh, just scrolling around, see how my friends are doing."
mhm.
Because I didn't really think too much of myself as like an active person on social media until like Letterboxd came around or, like, at least
Oh,
something movie related come around, that's when I started becoming a little bit more active on social media. So now when I got older and Facebook is still somehow relevant, I, like, just go check on there just to see my friends' activities to see, like, what they're saying or what they
yeah.
do or anything somewhat movie related, but other than that, I just kinda just scroll Facebook, whereas with Instagram and TikTok, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna interact a little bit more."
Well, I think it's interesting all the editing that gets done on posting visually through Instagram or visually through TikTok versus Facebook is a little bit more, it feels like sharing memes or URLs or information. And as a
Yeah.
filmmaker, I'm so interested in TikTok because I'm learning to edit with just simple little projects. It's not a big deal. It's not a thing I want to show off at a festival, but, like, "Oh, okay, this is how you would take, this is how you would do this edit, this is how you need this lighting," which is great because we're reviewing films, so we're thinking about how to make good films, and then we're practicing making little films. Do you yourself feel like maybe you're a filmmaker? Do you wanna go into filmmaking? How does that temptation feel coming towards you?
Yeah, good question. Cause on TikTok, like, there are some points in my videos where I like to get a little creative in
Mhm.
terms of, like, how I wanna present my videos, just like how you do yours
Yeah.
videos. There's, like, times where I was like, "Ooh, I just wanna do, like, a little funny skit,"
Mhm.
or just, like, make, like, grand videos that, like something like montages. For some reason, like, I love making montage style in
That's
my
great.
TikTok videos,
That's great.
uh, and and they're so fun to do. They're really fun, and that makes it even more, like, fun when you're with friends. Because usually I always do videos by myself, and I always have, like, a
Mm.
little bit like a tripod and just, like, kinda, like, work my way around it. Because I think, like, the most recent video I did where I did try to, like, really, like, go for something really interesting was my review for I Saw the TV Glow, where I
Yes.
was, like, thinking to myself, "I really wanna use the scene from this video game PT where it had like the radio and it has like this weird disjointed distorted sound, and I'm like, I don't think anyone has really used it in the video, so I'm like, I really want to like put that into the video. And the way that I like framed the shots, I was like I get like so giddy. I was like, oh my goodness,
Yes.
this looks so good.
Yes,
I, it,
absolutely.
it's super exciting. Like, yeah, there are times that like I do like if I ever want to make a film, I do have like ideas for it, but never really into fruition. And also the ideas I have are like super like complex. I'm like,
Mm.
let's like start with something like a little bit more small and basic before we get into like the higher ones. Because at least for me, my philosophy is like if you want to do films that you're really passionate about, start out with something small first that you're still passionate about, but not what you really want to make until and you have enough experience and research where you are fully ready to tackle something you really want to talk about that no film has really talked about essentially. And it's really fun. I do like to do make videos, but I also like to act too because I've
Mhm.
been in some plays and musicals
Oh, yeah.
in high school and college
Cool.
and local communities as well. And
That's wonderful.
yeah, and they're so fun. They really are fun to do where I just put myself out of that character and get out of that like boundary. I put myself in this bubble essentially. Like there's one time where that was in a musical I was in called Cabaret where I had to do something that I never thought I would have to do.
Oh, yeah. Cabaret's a risky musical.
Yeah, it is. 2 things I had to do. 1, I had to speak a little bit German, and I was like, I don't know how this is gonna work, but I did have a little practice. Wasn't too bad in the end. The
Mhm.
second one, which is one I was a lot more iffy on, was just me in my underoos, and I'm
Oh,
just like,
bless.
"Oh!" And it's coming from the audience. Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
And I was still nerve-wracking when I was showing it from my friends, but then once I got to the audience, like, people were having a ball for it. I did, like, a little improv where I just kinda, like, hype myself, like, "Oh!" and
Mhm.
just, like and it gets a laugh out of the audience, and I was like and I felt good about myself. I was like, "Okay, this is really, really good. It's getting a good reaction out of people. I'm gonna" and the more I keep doing it, the more I feel comfortable
Yes.
doing what I like to do, which is just act in front of the audience. And yeah, no, there's some points I'd like to be a filmmaker, and there's some points I would like to be like an actor. And
Mhm.
I just think it'd be just really fun in terms of just putting yourself out there and be part of like short film or anything really where you can like voice yourself out there for people to watch and see and listen and be like, this person is good or this person is alright or something. Like, at
Yeah.
least it's the form of discussion that, like,
Mhm.
whether it's good or bad, they're talking about you, and then just, like, makes you feel good. You're like, "Oh, you put yourself out there," like, even if it's, like, not the best or, not the greatest, you put yourself into it. It's the fact that you still put yourself out there. You still,
Yes.
like, challenge yourself to do what you love to do, and I think
Yeah,
that's what really
absolutely.
matters in the long haul, and that you just have fun.
I think that that's really, really important and very, very much embodied in what I like about the film talk community, which is that it's almost a turducken. People are talking about film while making little films. And so the
Mhm.
credibility of the like person who is talking is inherently rolled in the quality of the way that they've shot what they're talking about. And so like, oh, it's delicious, it's beautiful. And for a person like us who wants to make in any concept in any way be involved in filmmaking, it is so hard to get involved in capital F filmmaking where you need a whole damn city and it takes a very long time to get it done and you are just a cog in the machine even if you are the director. So
Mm.
this is a way to simplify it and like you say, just make something because the impetus to make is so inherent and it's
Mhm.
beautiful for people who want to critique things to also want to make things and then have those things be critiqued in and of themselves because you're right, we're putting ourselves out there with our opinion, and we're also putting ourselves out there with our face, our diction, our cinematography, however it may be. Even if we're just sitting in front of the camera, you
Mhm.
gotta light yourself well. I need to be able to hear you. I don't care what you're saying if I can't fucking hear you, right?
Yeah. Like, filmmaking is an art in itself, but I also do think that criticism is also an art as well, because
Yes.
you are putting yourself out there. You wanna talk about what you love to talk about
Mhm.
and, like, why you wanna talk about this, and that
Mhm.
gives you, like, a little bit, like, a mindset of, like, this is what this person is looking for, or this is what this person's looking for. Like, everyone has their own perspectives
Of
and
course.
opinions in terms of any film that they watch. They can, like, people can say, like, Citizen Kane is the best movie of all time, and then there's gonna be that one person like me, like, a long time ago, multiple watchers, like, "This is boring. The filmmaking is great, and I really like the story, but it's so boring," until I got older, and I was like, "Oh, okay, now I have a sudden appreciation for the film as well." There are, like, some films I, like, have a rewatch, I have a completely different opinion on. It's crazy how it works in terms of, like, not only just you get more experience with age, but you also, like, dive more into films the
Mhm.
more films you watch in the long haul of things.
Oh, yeah, and sometimes I'll watch a film, have a reaction, watch a subsequent completely unrelated film that will change my opinion of the other film I just watched. That's my
Mhm.
favorite. Actually, that just happened to me with Kinds of Kindness and Long Legs because I saw those in sequence. And while I
Yeah.
did not enjoy the experience of Kind of Kindness, which I think is the point, it is a feel bad movie.
Yeah.
The second one is a body ho it's 3 vignettes. Have you seen Kinds of Kindness?
I've seen both Kinds of Kindness, and I just recently watched Long Legs.
Wonderful. Okay, so I won't spoil anything, but the second one in the Kinds of Kindness is a body horror, and it really made me so tense that I was, like, gripping the seat that I was in. I literally remember white knuckling the chair I was sitting in. And Long Legs is fine, but it was pitched to
Mhm.
me as, "You're gonna white knuckle the seat." And so, having left Long Legs, I went, "Damn it, that second part of Kinds of Kindness was really, really good." And so I have to change my review a little.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. There are some points where I was like, with the recent movie, I had a whole opinion ordeal was Old,
Oh
where at
god,
first
yes.
watch, where I was in the audience, and it could be like a factor because the audience I was in could be
Mhm.
that. But like when when I first watched it, everybody was laughing, everybody was like making fun of the film, and I was kind of like here, I was kind of like with the audience too, because with M Night Shyamalan films, you never know what you expect because even if it's something that's good or bad, you always get something interesting. It's never
Yes.
boring, and you
That's
always get something
fair.
that just, like, baffles you.
Yes, 100%, and that's why I keep going back.
Yeah, and so, like, when I watched it, I was like, "Okay, this isn't good. There's, like, a lot of things to make fun of." I gave it 2 star,
Mm.
and then, like, some of the people I know say, like, "Why don't you give it a shot?" Because like, when they watched it, they loved it, and then I was like, "Okay, alright," and I respect their opinion, so I was like, "Okay," I
Yeah.
decided to go watch again, this time with a completely different audience. This time, they weren't laughing, they were just, like, no comments, no laughter, just watching it, and then when I was watching, I was like, "Holy shit, this is actually really, really good," and by the end of it, I was, like, just staring at the floor, I was like, "Oh my god, this shit fucked me up so much, oh my god."
Mhm. 100%. I think, Room for Scream, Gigi just posted that she saw Long Legs and everybody in the audience was such an asshole, it really messed up her experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you gotta vibe with the whole room. That's fantastic. I feel like Old is both of those movies at all times. There are parts where it's inherently flawed, but there are parts overall that are very good. And these are comments that make me super
Mhm.
excited for talking about Jingle All the Way because I feel like there might be a save here. But before we dive into that, I do want to ask for the audience so we can get an idea before we talk about what you might not like. Let's get an idea
Mhm.
of stuff that you do like. And let's hit me with your letterbox top 4.
Oh yeah, certainly. So like, we'll start with like 4 to 1, just spill the suspense. So like with number 4, it's Portrait of a Lay on Fire, and
Oh,
the reason
yeah.
why I have it there is it's one of the most beautiful looking films I've ever seen in
Gorgeous.
my life. Like, I know it sounds kind of pretentious to say it, but like almost every scene is like framed like a painting, and it kind of makes
Yeah.
sense in the context of this story.
Yeah, it is.
And then while the movie is, like, relatively quiet, not a lot of, like, tension going on, the dialogue is what keeps you, like, riveted in the chemistry between the 2 main leads that is super genuine while also, like, diving into the male gaze from a female perspective, which
Mhm.
I don't think it's ever heard of, at least for me personally, and the soundtrack is beautiful, of course, and once we get to, like, the ending, once you not get too much in spoilers,
Yeah.
but, like, when you understand the context of the story that's was talking about, it's one of the best endings you will ever see, and it's also, like, just leaves you in such an emotional end that just blows your fucking mind, essentially.
That's good. I do love a film that has a narration that has a payoff. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, it can be a slow burn, but give me a thing that we're burning towards.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I could understand the movie's not for everyone because it has a
Yeah.
very slow pace, but it just,
Yeah.
like, worked for me personally, and I just think it's really awesome.
I think of all the films where it's gonna have a situation where the scenes, the cinematography are deeply like a painting, very, very
Yes.
artistic. That makes sense. And if you're looking for something like that, that is maybe a little less gimmicky than God, the one where Robin Williams is What Dreams May Come, which is a fine movie and very beautifully shot
Yeah,
as well, but is a little more
agreed.
maudlin than say this. You can still experience that without it being so like, it's a painting.
Yeah, this movie is a lot more subtle.
Yeah.
So number 3 is oh dear. Number 3 is The Happiness of the Katakuris. Wildly different from Fortunately on Fire.
Yeah.
And I came across this in a group chat where we all watched together. And knowing from Takeshi Miike's films, he's always has something very different and weird and wacky out there. So watching that movie for the first time ever, I was like enthralled, mind blown. Like everything it was trying to do, I didn't think it was gonna tackle. Will also make it like range from heartfelt to like darkly comedic.
Mhm.
That's there's like some things that still stuck in my mind
Oh, that's
that
awesome.
is just completely outrageous, but also so entertaining, so funny, and and you get to know about the characters so well that you're just like, oh my goodness, I want them to get through this limbo thing that they're going through is insane, especially. And it doesn't give a fuck about what it's trying to do, especially when one of the posters is straight up just like a parody of The Sound of Music, and you watch and you're like, "What? Why is that poster like that?" And you watch and you're like, "Oh god, no. You can go fuck yourself, movie." But
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes an artist makes a movie where they're like, "No, I wanted to make a piece of art. I did not care what anyone thought about it."
yeah, because like, I grew up like yeah, I grew up with something like very like slow and talkative like while I was growing up, but also like grew up with like crazy ones like Kung Fu Hustle. That's also like one of my
Mm.
favorites, but it's not my top 4.
Good
That
one though.
combines martial art with Looney Tunes that is so cartoony, but it's like so funny,
Yeah.
and you never see anything like this at all. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's it and the fact I grew up with that is just kind of a wild thing, especially
Mhm.
since there are like a lot of movies I grew up with. I'm like, I don't know if I was really supposed to watch this when I
Yep,
was young.
yep. I think there's always one or two where people are like, "Looking back at it now, I'm not sure I should have been shown that."
Yeah, especially since when I always shock people when I tell them that like one of the films I grew up with was The Green Mile, and the only thing I remember was Michael Clark Duncan.
Oh my god. Yeah, if you're gonna remember some probably that and the vomiting the, like, evil out, it would be the most memorable thing for that's not
Yes.
too bad. I mean, at least it has a good overall message and is a pretty film, like,
Mhm.
I'm old enough that I a little bit predate film ratings below R, so PG-13 didn't always exist. So
Yes.
when I was a kid, it was just kind of a crapshoot, and the things that I've watched when I was younger would be hard R now, and it's just like, "Oh,
Mhm.
why the were we watching that? And why was I watching Usual Suspects at age 9? Who knows? Who knows? But it was
Oh
a very good
no.
movie.
Yeah, it really is. Because I know, like, during, like, the 80s or 90s or something like that, when PG-13 is becoming a bit of a thing, like,
Mhm.
with Temple of Doom being PG, and you're watching it like, that's a R at some points, and Gremlins as well, but then once they did the
Mhm.
PG-13, like, even then, back then, PG-13s were very gritty because the first film that came out of it was Red Dawn, and how they
Yes.
do the death scenes are, like, explodes out of their body from getting gunshot. I'm like, "Damn, this is still, like, it's like a hard PG-13, if not very R." So, knowing the fact that they allowed that, but, like, but then as time progresses, like, PG-13 is, like, what we usually see now.
Yeah, it still feels pretty arbitrary, and there've been a couple documentaries about the, like, limited group of people who actually determine the ratings each year, but
Yeah.
it has narrowed in because when it first started out, it was a real crapshoot.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think I know what you're talking about. Because I remember watching a documentary like that called "The Film Is Not Yet Rated," and
Exactly,
it
great doc.
yeah. Yeah, and how they, like, talk about, like, the test members and how they
Mhm.
determine what rating they should give it and why they should give it, and then how they, like, dive into, like, the differences between PG-13 and rated R are very fascinating, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yes, that is I think all of the people who are into film criticism and film nerdery should check out that documentary.
I agree as well.
Awesome, awesome.
So, number 2 is Columbus. Going back to a little bit to, like, Portrait on Fire. Columbus has, like, Haley Lou Richardson and John Cho in it. It's
Mm.
stylized kind of like a before sunrise, sunset, midnight kind of deal, where the, focal point of the film is just them having a conversation with each other, but they don't get together. They're just like friends. But what I love about this film that makes it like a slightly better than the before trilogy is that there is like more going on than just like them having a conversation, because we get like Haley Lou Richardson just talk about her life going on, that she doesn't know what to do with her college life, but she does have like a very fascination with the construction or infrastructure, I believe, and
Mhm.
how she talks about it in a way is kind of like a metaphor for filmmaking. Just the way just like
Mm.
construct each infrastructure and how she talks about it. Like,
Mhm.
and she says that like almost every building has some form of personality put onto them, which is something that for me is like, oh yeah, this is kind of like filmmaking. Every filmmaker has their own personality, and their conversations are very intriguing. And John Cho's character is also just like trying to deal with like the death of his father, but he's not really
Mm.
sure whether or not he should go because he doesn't have a strong connection with him. And so they just came across each other and they just like basically just start having conversation, walk around in very beautiful scenery, where it'd be like the bridge or the forest and all the fields and all that stuff. It's like very, very heartwarming, very chill, and it's just really nice. And the director himself, if I remember, he did a section on the Criterion Collection for the Before Sunrise, I believe, where he did his tribute to the film by just editing clips of the film and making his own like trailer of some kind that really gets people sucked in. And it's a really good it's a really good tribute to the movie, and I feel like he definitely understood what make those films so well, and how he kind of used a little bit of that style into his own film that
Mhm.
is really beautiful and very, very engaging to watch.
Awesome. Well, I've not seen that one, but now I'm definitely gonna check it out. I do love Linklater, and I do love that trilogy. I think our guest on the Raiders of the Lost Ark labeled one of those as his top 4. So,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, that's very interesting.
Oh yeah, I definitely, I definitely recommend it. Even though there's another film he did called After Yang. I still need to watch that, but it's like a science fiction, and some people told me it's just as good as Columbus. I'm just like, oh,
Ooh.
really? Interesting. And it's
Aha!
and,
Twist my
and it's
arm.
A24 too, so it's like it's my favorite studio. So like, why not?
I mean, I love A24, but I guess, being as old as I am, I'm a little jaded because I've seen so many things I love come and literally kill themselves. And they did make that recent announcement about wanting to go more into franchised films with
Yeah.
sequels, kind of more like Blumhouse. And don't get me wrong, I
Yeah.
love Blumhouse, but they are not the reverence I give to A24. So I hope
No.
A24 still manages to have that edge of somehow exalting new stories, new filmmakers, creativity that I haven't seen in a way, even though they are filmmakers who have been making for a while. They're not all debut filmmakers, but it does feel fresh.
Yeah, yeah. Because I'm still like watching A24 films, recent to A24 films to this day, and still as of right now, they have been seem to be giving filmmakers their own shot in the films, and
Mhm.
a lot of like I've been seeing like dramas from them more so than like
Mhm.
horror films,
Yeah.
which is honestly pretty fine. I tend to love dramas, so it makes things all the more better. While also like giving some like horror films that I know will fuck me up. So it's like kind of goes without saying on that end.
Mhm.
Like the only thing like yeah franchise we ever got was the X trilogy, which
Yeah.
I did recently watch Maxine, and it's a solid end to the trilogy in my opinion, but it's definitely the weakest in my opinion.
Mhm.
But I do like the fact that like that they give Ty West his own trilogy, knowing the fact this man has never made a sequel to like anything ever until this trilogy came into mind, and it's really cool to see from a filmmaker perspective how he started to where he's at now. Because there are some points where I like to like review films that the directors made in chronological order, just like look
Mhm.
over them in retrospect to see like how they first started and how where they're at now, especially since, like, there's some filmmakers I know that are just straight up just YouTubers.
Yes. They like the talk to me people.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to Me People or the Scream franchise,
Mhm.
like, just start out as YouTubers or even Bo Burnham, so there's some, like, really, like, cool filmmakers that, like, start out as YouTubers, and
Mhm.
hell, I mean, we're gonna get to my favorite film second, but, like, how that one specific film, that's my favorite, like, used, like, YouTube as a way to learn how to edit their film, and I just thought it was such a really intriguing choice that, like, has never been heard of, but, like, how that ended up being is like, "Oh, wow, this looks amazing." Like, it definitely looks like a professionally made film,
Mm.
and I just I like filmmakers that do, like, try to, like, figure out things, how they start small like I said, start off small, but also get bigger and grander,
Mhm.
where they like to make films that they really wanna make.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid to make their mistakes in front of other people. There's this
Mhm.
idea, and as a circus performer who's learned juggling, there is so much failure in that performance that you must do before you're doing it correctly. Like, you have to drop it 1,000 billion times before you're going to do it correctly. And if you're afraid of that, if you can't get through that, you're never going to make a single film. It just isn't going to work out for you. I'm so sorry. You're going to have to make some mistakes before you do well, and that sucks. It really does, but that's how it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Cause like, I remember when I was doing videos and I look at them in retrospect
Yeah, oh
back
god,
then,
yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
We
just
all do.
gets you, like and I just look at them, I'm just like, "Wow," like, look how things have changed back
Mhm,
then to now. Cause I remember, like, in the first few videos I've done, I could definitely say, like, "Oh, yeah," I could definitely tell, like, I'm still getting new to this, my confidence wasn't quite there, my
mhm,
tonality of how I speak of
mhm,
these films is not I mean, it's clear, but it's not, like, confident enough where it just feels
mhm.
like you're just talking like a robot in a way, but then once you, like once you well, now looking at them now, you're like, "Oh, yeah, I now know what I did wrong, or now I know what I need to improve on, and I
Mhm,
could use those into videos." Because there are some points I like to try to do something different, and there's some points I'm like, "Okay, we'll just, like, keep doing this just because like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of ordeal."
mhm.
Another thing to add on to is, like, no product's gonna be perfect. There's always gonna be something that's wrong with it, but it's always, like, interesting to be like, "Oh," like, you think of the product you made is perfect, but then you understand, like, what people are saying, like, "Oh, no, like, there's some issues with this one," or and then you're like, "Oh, okay, alright." Like, if you wanna be, like, a growing, aspiring filmmaker that is, they were like, "Okay, this is actually pretty interesting," and, like and use that towards the next film with like the notes that people have said about your film that really intrigued you. Unless you're gonna be like
Absolutely.
one of those filmmakers, be like, no, my film is perfect, and nobody was gonna say is like gonna change my mind whatsoever. No,
Yeah.
you're not gonna learn at all.
You could go hang out with Tommy Wiseau and be a joke in the industry.
Exactly. You're just gonna be stuck in your own bubble, and then you would never
Mhm.
understand like why you didn't like I don't know advance yourself further into your career. It's
Yeah.
just be tragic that way.
It is tragic. It can't be precious. I think with any kind of piece of art, once you release it into the wild, it is no longer your own. There's all the things that you brought to it to tell people what it meant. But like we're saying here as critics, our experiences, our age, our coming back to it a second time, our seeing a different movie after we saw it will all influence how we experience the art. So it's not a vacuum. You can't do that. So how could you make something perfect if it's not a vacuum and everyone is going to experience it differently? Like it's hilarious. The idea to even think you could.
Mm-hmm. And and even then, like I know there's like gonna be people who just say like, oh, movies back then are just like so good, and then you'd look back and you're like, I mean, no. I mean, yes and no. There are some movies that I'm like, "Oh, these are, like, classics. I love them."
Mhm.
And then there's some other films I'm like, "This doesn't hold up as much. This is really dated to today's standards. This is there's a lot of issues I have with the film."
Yeah, if you have to keep telling me it's of its time. It was a different time. Like, mhm.
No, because there are even films back then that were, like, still timeless to this day, so you can't
Yeah.
really even use that excuse or, like, "It's just a kid's movie." Like, you can't
Mhm.
really think of it that way. Okay, yeah, I mean, like, you expect me to, like, put, like, Pixar films a similar category as, like, fucking Illumination? Like, no. I
No.
can't really, like, think of them the same way, especially since there are kids' films that are, like, mature, and they
Yeah.
are, like, something like that, kids and adults will appreciate. Maybe some kids will be bored, maybe, but like, but, there's like, there's always risk,
Yes,
but and you're not gonna please everybody.
absolutely, and that's another great point for bringing us into Jingle All the Way, but we have one more letterbox. Let's get our letterbox top 1, and then we'll go into Jingle All the Way.
So, and number 1 for me, my personal favorite is Everything Ever All at Once.
Oh, good answer.
It's so good.
So good.
I watched this with my mom. Didn't really
Mm.
know what I was getting myself into. I mean, I have seen the director's previous film, Swiss Army Man, with Daniel Radcliffe as a zombie, not zombie, just
So
dead person.
so I
It
only just saw that recently. It's glorious.
it's very funny, and I love it, and I can't stop thinking about that Jurassic Park reference every time I talk about that movie. It's just so good.
It's weird in the most beautiful way.
I agree, and that's the same thing that can be said about Everything Ever All at Once.
Yes.
Because I watched this with an audience and my mom, and it's very interesting. Because like, my mom wanna watch it because she's a fan of Michelle Yeoh, and I've
Yeah.
seen some of Michelle Yeoh's films, so
Mhm.
I've only wanna watch it because same director as Swiss Army Man, it's A24, and I was
Mhm.
just like and people have said like, "Oh, it's like the best A24 film they've seen," and I'm like, "I've seen a lot of A24 films, that's a very high bar."
They did Green Knight. You wanna come at me with that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, and yet
Yeah, and my favorite for the longest time for A24 was Moonlight, so I was like, "How can this be better than Moonlight?" So,
great
yeah,
choice
it's
too, great
so
choice.
so good, so good. So, I watched it with my mom, and then the whole crowd was uproarious, just filled with laughter, filled with like just happiness. Everybody's having a great time. I definitely heard some sniffles throughout the film, and then I was watching it. I was in the same ballpark as the audience. Everyone, I was loving every single minute of it, and I was like, "Wow, that trailer just like gave us a little bit of taste." That when I thought like, "Oh, maybe they showed too much." No, they showed you like a lot more. That I was like, "Wow, they thought of everything, everything that they could think of in terms like the multiverse and what the
Mhm.
film represents." And then as for my mom, she fell asleep. And I'm like, how? That's how? It's like one of the most fast paced films I've seen in a long time. And she's like,
And it's
yeah.
about
I'm like,
being a mom!
Yeah, and I feel like with with us being like from the Asian demographic, I feel like it really like supposed to like cater more to us essentially. But
Yeah.
my mom's like fell asleep and she's like, "No, this is just too weird for me." I'm like, and I was like, Mom, I feel like this movie's also kind of about you too. So I feel like this should be your ballpark, but I don't know. As and the movie, I just there's a lot to talk about that film, at least for a little bit, because like I love the filmmaking. I just the editing, and that's what I'm gonna bring back to it, is so top notch.
Yeah.
And the fact that like the editor
Yeah.
team literally had to use YouTube to learn how to edit all this stuff is insane.
Oh my god. Yeah. It's astronomical what they accomplished.
Yeah, and I agree so much for that. And the fight scenes are so good, and it was also just amazing to see Ke Huy Quan in the film. No, in fact, I
Uh-huh.
have seen him in um Indiana Jones, in the Goonies, I believe. I could be
Mhm.
wrong.
No, definitely, he is in the Goonies, 100%.
Okay, okay. And so seeing him back into the screen was like a really nice delight that kind of like brings a little bit of my nostalgia came
Mhm.
to like on that.
Mhm.
And it's one of the funniest films I've ever seen. Like I watched it like recently with my girlfriend. She was
Mhm.
having a ball with it, and I'm still was laughing my ass off. And I was like, "Yep, this is still my favorite film." And it's also just like very heartfelt because it just dives into like generational trauma from an Asian American perspective, while also just like dive into acceptance in terms of who you are and who you identify as, whether it be your sexuality, your religion, or gender identity, just all this like acceptance stuff that is, despite all the weird stuff going on in the film, is very empowering, very like impactful, that you never thought you would get so emotional over a boulder or a rock at all. But you watch that and you're like, this is
That scene is particularly good.
yes, I it's like one of the highlights for me. We'll also just have a banger soundtrack, which was nice to see like Mitski get an Oscar nomination for it alongside David Byrne. That was really cool.
Mhm, mhm. That was so cool. Whole Oscar reception for it was wonderful.
I that's the thing too, I'm gonna bring this up because I remember when that was going on, I didn't watch the Academy Awards because I was too busy trying to finish up the Last of Us show, but I knew
Mhm.
in my heart, I was like, "This movie's gonna win a lot of awards," and then knowing the fact that, like then hearing about how Everything Everywhere All at Once won so many awards, and I finished up the show, I was like, "A win is a win." Yeah.
Yes,
It's
yes.
it's a win-win situation for me both ends because like I know the fact my favorite film got so many awards just made me so happy, and I got to finish like the best video game adaptation series I've ever seen. So it's just quite an achievement on my part, and I feel like I definitely made the right choice on that.
It's such a good series. We've covered it on this show, and I only do movies, but I made an exception for one episode of Last of Us to bring it on the show because it's such a wonderful adaptation.
I agree.
I could sit here and talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once for probably an entire episode. Easily,
I agree. I
easily.
agree.
But let's shift the gears here with Jingle All the Way. I wanted to say with Jingle Everything All at Once, which might be an interesting mashup. We're not gonna reach the levels of magnificence of Everything Everywhere All at Once, or really anything from the Daniel brothers. They are super absurd. But Jingle All the Way is pretty absurd and very satirical. And I think
Mhm.
if people don't know that, it can seem like a real piece of shit film. And it has been featured on How Did This Get Made, which is a show that specifically features questionable films. I mean, we're talking about 2.9 on Letterboxd,
Mhm.
with about 28% coming in about 3 stars, 40% positive on Rotten Tomatoes, and 21% positive for the critics on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Why haven't you seen Jingle All the Way?
So there's like some factors to that film. One, I've seen some of the director's work. He's done stuff like the Flintstones. He's done stuff like the Scooby-Doo films, not the one with Matthew Lillard in it, the ones from Cartoon Network.
What's so important about this director, because when you said to me, I haven't seen much by this director, I literally went, who the fuck is this guy? He specifically does the, like, sequels
Yes.
to questionable films. Like, he did the sequel to Scooby-Doo live action. He did the sequel to Flintstones live action, which
He did.
neither of which are received well enough to deserve a sequel in the first place.
And he's done other things like Arithmeria with Ice Cube and The Spy Next Door with Jackie Chan. Those films I
Mhm.
have seen, and
Mhm.
uh, I grew up with the Flintstones, and I grew up with Arithmeria. I remember when I watched the Flintstone, I was like, "This is fine." I mean, it's like, I mean, I didn't really think too much of it, whether or not it's like faithful or not. But I did watch the show when I was young, so I didn't think too much of it. But Arithmeria, I remember hating the kids in that film that were so mean spirited that
Yeah.
I was like, Ice Cube, why are you still with these kids? I feel like this is not even worth it at this point. If anything, you should like. I was so. I remember back then I was like, these kids are mean.
Yes, these kids are kind of assholes.
Yeah, they were complete little shits. I hated them to the point that like I was just not here for the movie, and I was like, "Oh my," and then his car I remember, like, his car just keeps getting wrecked. I'm like, "This poor guy. I don't know how he has to deal with it just to be with this girl." I'm like, "I'm so sorry." Recently, or as I got older, then I watched The Spy Next Door with Jackie Chan. I do like
Mhm,
me some Jackie Chan films, and then I watched it, and I
mhm.
was like, "This is the same issue as Arithmeria again with the stupid-ass kids that make me really hate them."
There was a period in the '90s where they just kept writing precocious, annoying little shit children.
Yeah, and I was just like, "Oh my goodness, does this directors have a thing with, like, creating the most despicable kids ever put into a film? I hate this so much." And they were just making Jackie Chan's character life so miserable, and I'm just like, "Again, Jackie Chan, this is not worth it. If anything, you're Jackie Chan. You should just teach them a lesson." But that's just my opinion, but I
Well,
hate that
I w
films.
I think that they're, and he's not this director definitely has a line of that through his stuff. He also winds up doing the very lesser known, and oh my god, how did they do this, sequel to A Christmas Story. Have you seen A Christmas
Mhm.
Story, the original one?
I've
So,
seen the first one, yeah.
he yeah, this is the second one, which is an abomination. He also does that one. So this is his first Christmassy film. But, like, he definitely he definitely likes to have children that are annoying in his films.
Mhm.
But what if you were invited to enjoy hating children? Because I hate children, and I kind of enjoy hating children. I find them to be like that in real life.
Yeah. And the thing is, like kids in general for me, I don't mind. Like, yeah, they can be a little annoying sometimes, but like,
Mhm,
I don't mind them as much as I do with movie kids. Something about
mhm,
these kids in these movies just really like tick me off like the wrong way, and it just
mhm,
makes me like not enjoy myself watching these types of films. That
mhm,
I know, like reading a little bit into like Jingle All the Way, it does have another child actor in the film,
mhm,
and it's like Jake Lloyd from Phantom Menace. And again,
mhm,
like no disrespect to the child actors at all. I have nothing against them. I just don't like how the director directs these kids to be this way that
mhm,
are just
mhm,
not for me. Like the best
mhm,
film that I have seen from the director was the Flintstones. And that's probably
mhm,
because it doesn't have a lot of annoying kids in there, at least not
mhm,
that to my knowledge. And also has some like nice production design to it that I feel like, oh, this is
mhm.
like not too bad representation of the world that they're in. But again, just
Yeah.
the humor, not for me. I hated it.
You do get a lot of production design in Jingle All the Way. It's shot on a lot in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
because of the amount of stunts that are in it. They could not make it safe to shoot it somewhere else. I mean, they've got, like, cranes and helicopters and drops, and it is big. I think we were
Mhm.
talking about earlier when you can really enjoy watching a film because as an actor, you know what it's like to be in a really fun production. Even if your
Yes.
production of Our Town isn't the best ever production of Our Town, you know that actor is having such a great time that you kind of get, it's like a more memorable experience than, say, Broadway's version of it. And I do think you get bits of that in this. It is such an absurd film. You can kind of fall in love with the little bits of the actors having fun. You do also get Phil Hartman. I don't know how you feel about Phil Hartman. I adore him, and I feel like we lost him way too young, super tragically.
I have heard of Phil Hartman. He's done. I know he was in some Simpsons episodes that were like classic that he was in that I
Tons of
really
Simpsons
enjoy.
episodes, yes.
I think he
Yeah.
was also in some SNL skits. I don't know
He was a
too
Saturday Night
much.
Live actor, yeah.
So I'm like somewhat familiar of his work, and honestly, like
Mhm.
I do remember like some parts of his in The Simpsons I remember really enjoying. So
Mhm.
I do think he's like a pretty funny actor. I have
Yeah.
seen I've seen some clips of him in Jingle All the Way, and there's something about the cookie surgery. I'm just like, what is happening? But
He plays a very interesting character. He's very nice.
Mhm.
They actually had Phil Hartman read for Sinbad's character,
Oh, okay.
but they couldn't get him to be enough of an asshole. Like they just didn't buy him as douchebag because
Mhm.
Sinbad is the antagonist. Although they also didn't think that Sinbad could pull off the antagonist. And the original casting for it was supposed to be Joe Pesci or Danny DeVito, who was too short because he had done a comedy called Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but they just couldn't make it work
Okay.
for him at all. So Phil Hartman plays a character that's very nice, but he's actually a real shiggets. He's trying to, and has successfully done, he's trying to sleep his way through all the moms in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And so he is hitting on Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife. Now, the interesting thing about Jingle All the Way, and the reason why I enjoy it, but I want to temper this with, it is not a good movie. It is a
Mm.
3-star movie, but why it stands out for me, especially in this guy's Louvre, both the writer and the director, is that it is a Christmas movie that is for people who do not like Christmas.
Oh.
It is about the earnestness of what really happens to most Americans in the consumerist now that is Christmas.
Okay.
So, how do you feel? How do you feel about Christmas? Do you love Christmas movies?
Um, yes and no.
Fair answer.
Yeah, there's some classics Christmas I remember watching, like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, the short film of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and
Mhm.
the Charlie Brown one. So like the really
Mhm.
classic ones like that. But then they're just like the really bad ones, like Hallmark movies, Christmas movies,
Oh
like stuff
god.
like that. And I think that's another example.
They film in Connecticut and I get a lot of background for them, but they film those in the summer. So you have to go down to Connecticut and put on like 7 sweaters and that get fake snow blown at you and just be like, "I'm so sweaty. I'm so sweaty." And
Oh
they
dear.
pump them out so many. But yeah,
Uh,
sorry.
you're good. But yeah, it's something just about Christmas movies. I feel like it's just a bit too schmaltzy for me, way too corny for me, and I can handle like
Oh.
corniness. Literally, like some of my favorite films are like really corny, but like that's the charm of it. But with something like Christmas
Mhm.
movies, like Hallmark wise, I'm just like, oh, good gravy, like way
Mhm.
too schmaltzy, just way too much for me to handle. It's very like eye
Mhm.
rolly kind of moment here.
Mhm.
There are some like Christmas movies I remember seeing, like Christmas with the Cranks and Deck the Halls, that like I guess kind of tried to be anti-Christmas, but then still ends up having a Christmas feel by the end of it. And I'm like, damn, even those movies were terrible. So I'm like, a lot-
Mhm.
just I'm just starting to think like Christmas movies are just not necessarily for me. And then the classic ones I'm seeing are like the only legit good Christmas films that I've seen. Like literally, like maybe the most recent Christmas film I watched was Krampus, and that was like a horror.
Good example, though. It's interesting because much like Christmas movies, Christmas music doesn't really exist in our time period. It is all also very old, and the good stuff is like from the 50s or before, good stuff, but they don't really
Mhm.
make modern classics for Christmas music either. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said corny versus say campy. I like a film that is campy. I
Mhm.
don't like a film that is corny. And that feels like such a hair to split, but it comes in the intent. I think horror movies that intend to be campy, like Evil Dead, for example, they
Yes.
know the budget isn't entirely there and they're doing what they can with what they have to be funny. This film has a $75 million budget. It's not that much at the time. Let's think about the I think the second Bad Boys had a $90 million budget. So with
Mhm.
an action film, this is not that much. 20 million is going to Schwarzenegger himself. So
Okay.
that's a little bit less than a third. So the movie is being made on like 50 or $60 million.
Mhm.
He winds up getting offered this movie because he wanted to do a remake of Planet of the Apes. That was his passion project, and he had been like waiting to be able to do it. And
Mhm.
the studio said, like, it's not going to work. The script has fallen through. The best that we can do is give you this, which makes it makes it sad. It does make it sad. I think he did the best with what he could and he had a good time filming it, but can you imagine being told you can't do your passion project? Here's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that perspective here. Because I do like, I remember like seeing some clips of him in the film, and
Mhm,
he does look like he's having a good time, even though it
mhm,
shows a little bit of his wacky side, especially when it
mhm,
has this line where he says, "Put that cookie down now." Like it's like everyone knows that part of the film, even if you've
mhm,
never seen that film at all.
mhm.
And it's not even saying like Arnold Schwarzenegger can't do Planet of the Apes. He has range. I've seen films he's in that he can, like, really
Oh,
act.
absolutely. I think it was a rights issue. They could not get the script together, and so they were
Mhm,
like, "It's just completely fallen through. We can't make it work for you." I like this because it is not maudlin. It is not I would say Die Hard is more of a Christmas movie than this movie. It is set at Christmas. The impetus is Christmas.
mhm.
Literally, the entire movie is like, "Fuck Christmas," but it is still made in the '90s, so the last I think if you check your timestamp, the last, like, 3 minutes is like, "Oh, yeah, family, Christmas." And it feels tacked on,
Mhm.
but the rest of it feels like the scriptwriter was trying to go for something, let's say, Verhoeven-y. Have you seen RoboCop?
I have seen RoboCop, yes.
How do you feel about RoboCop? Do you feel like, "Oh, I get the satire there?"
It's been a while since I've seen it. I probably might
Mhm.
have at one point, but even if I didn't,
Or even Starship Troopers.
I've seen that too. It's been, again, years since I've seen those films, but even if I didn't think of
Mhm,
them as satire, I just still thought they were still very well-made films that I really still enjoy to this
mhm,
day, and I'm pretty sure if I watch
yeah,
it again on a adult lenses, I'm sure I probably will
mhm.
see the satire that it's trying to do.
Yeah, I think both of those films are very classic films, for Verhoeven that were panned when they came out because people took them at face value. I think that if
Mhm.
you watch Jingle All the Way, which again, it's not even really for kids, to be
Mhm.
honest, which is why the depiction of children is a little bit like, from an adult's viewpoint, they're definitely meant to be annoying.
Mhm.
It's much more enjoyable if you step back and you think like, "Oh, this movie is kind of in the vein of more Bad Santa than say,
Okay.
God, what was the one with Tim Allen where he gets to be Santa because he killed Santa?"
The Santa Claus.
The Santa Claus. He was actually considered for the Arnold Schwarzenegger role on this as well, and then winds up doing Santa Claus instead. It's the Santa Claus is funny and is a little bit like, "Oh, Christmas." This is
Mhm.
really a hard, like, "Fuck Christmas."
Which I'm here for, in a way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you said this movie, I have seen it just because I think it was in the zeitgeist when it came out, but it is not the kind of movie that someone normally seeks out. It's definitely not the worst movie we've done on this podcast so far,
Mhm.
or probably ever will, but it was a really interesting choice, and we haven't tackled the concept of Christmas movies at all, which for me, I hate Christmas movies. I hate them so damn much. I hate them so much. I think the only one I like might be A Christmas Story because it's a little tongue in cheek
Mhm.
and it is such a classic. So, yeah, this one will be interesting. I mean, you do like action movies, so you're
Mhm.
gonna get some good action. You do like the idea of a film trying, even though it's not going to be perfect, still making its story. But I will temper that with, this movie is kind of the last movie that either of these people, the writer and director, make. Like, I think they make one or two more after that, but after like 2006 and 2016, I think, for the other one, they're not currently still making movies.
Mm-hmm.
So temper that there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an illustrious career.
For sure, for sure. And even if the movie just like, I mean, I'm not expecting to be high art, obviously. If anything,
Mhm.
like, I just want the movie to be at least like entertaining, at least.
A fun time.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll have like a lot of flaws with it, but I'm sure at
Mhm.
least like, hopefully by the end of it, I at least will have a good time watching it, and that's all I want this movie to do. It's just entertain me. Like, I don't like.
Absolutely.
I'm asking for the simplest
Yeah.
bare minimum here.
Yes, we are setting our expectations. And honestly, if you come back in part 2 and you're like, "Fuck this movie," that's legit too. I by no means equivocate on my behalf. We can also just rip into this on the second half too. I mean, How
Hmm.
Did This Get Made is a great example of loving the bad.
Yes.
As we wrap up in the last 10 minutes real quick here, I do wanna ask you, as I ask everyone, is there something that you're like, "Oh boy, I hope this doesn't happen," and, "Oh boy, I kinda hope this does happen?"
So what I hope does happen is that since you did bring up the satire of the film, I do hope it's like effective for what it's trying to do, and it's not necessarily like in your face. That's like, oh, look what you
Mhm.
do, look what we're doing here, look what we're doing, because that does get very annoying and very grating. But would
Mhm,
be appreciative if it does lean into that one. Will also still be like, hey, we're having wacky, but we're having a good time.
mhm,
The one thing I'm like not looking forward to if they do that is like similar with the other films that he's done, a huge emphasis on annoying kid characters.
mhm,
And
mhm,
and that's just something I'm not looking forward to, like, when I
mm.
do get to see it, especially since there's a child actor and a child character in the film, so
I know, and especially because that poor child actor has been done dirty already, we know,
yes.
and yeah. So, it is painful to see him in anything where you're like, "No, his poor sweet body." I don't feel like it is that bad,
Mhm.
but of course, like, we all have our different abilities to handle that kind of things.
Yes.
The last thing I'll tell you before we do wrap up is that this film was written in response to a real life concept, which was the craze over Cabbage Patch Kids that happened in the 80s. It actually wound up
Hmm,
being released at the same time as Tickle Me Elmo. So
okay.
it's kind of like people notice this consumerism around Christmas taking over the world so much. So it's
Mhm.
written kind of outward of a single scene. And a lot of horror movies are written this way, where like we have this really cool kill idea, let's build an entire plot outward from this.
Mhm.
So you'll see the very famous scene where they're fighting over the toy in the movie. I think that's the scene I would tell you to look forward to seeing the most, because that's the point in which this movie iterates out. And as a structure point, I think it's interesting if you're interested in the way that things are written and the way that movies are made.
Okay.
As far as the most fun you'll have, it's going to be the ultimate scene, the like big final scene. It's very fun and very like, holy shit, guys! This it took 1,500 extras on a closed set to do the final
Oh.
scene.
That's unheard of nowadays.
Yeah, I like to give people just a little something to look forward to, and I will tell you that. Yeah, nowadays we just program it and hoard and be like, "Forget about this. I don't need to pay humans money."
Mhm.
She said as a background actor, not biased or jealous at all.
Oh, dear. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, we're gonna wrap this up, but do you have any final thoughts before we go and let you watch the movie?
Just I'm somewhat looking forward to it, but also like keeping it very cautious towards myself
Yeah.
of what I'm getting myself into, especially since there hasn't been a good film I've seen from this director. But hopefully, this will be the one film he does that I had a good time with.
I definitely would. This is a midday popcorn movie. Pop some popcorn, have a good fun. Maybe watch it with somebody else so the two of you can like knock back and forth, because there are parts that are like, holy. There's one scene where the word warehouse appears on screen and it is misspelled.
Oh no!
Yeah. So like, big mistakes. But, if you can have fun with that, I find this more fun to do that with another person, absolutely. Or if you've just watched something that was so fucking boring, you can pop this on and be like, "Wow, my brain can at least handle this now." All right. Well, I feel like I've set the expectations pretty good, and I am super excited to come back with you and see how it goes.
Same here. I'm looking forward to what I think of this film.
Here, have some non-alcoholic eggnog.
Welcome back. We are here, part 2, having both just watched, and I myself rewatched, Jingle All the Way. And we're gonna even cut a little bit ahead. I'm being told by Brandon there is a Jingle All the Way 2. I didn't know there was a 2. I do know that there's a teaser at the end of this movie that heavily implied they were gonna make a 2. Talk some more about that.
Yeah, so I remember I was doing a little bit of research of the first one. I've always heard that there was a second one for
Mhm.
the longest time, but I wasn't sure if I was ever gonna have time for it. But then once I finished watching the first one, I was like, okay, I am genuinely curious of the second one and see how that is. It's a completely different team, completely different actor. Instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's Larry the Cable Guy.
I'm just pulling up the poster, that's why I've made that horrifically shocked face with the muted mic on, because I just
Oh?
pulled it up and I was like, "Oh god, it's Larry the Cable Guy."
Yeah. And it's, a direct to DVD sequel, even though it's marketed like it's a movie that's coming on theaters, but it's not, and it's a WWE studio co-production with Fox, and it's just and it's just about, like, Larry the Cable Guy having a connection bond with his daughter, and his daughter is going to like visitation rights between her father and her mom, who's married to another person, and the father and the stepfather are kind of like in competition of each other of who's trying to be like the best father towards the daughter.
Mhm.
And so there was so the daughter wrote a letter to Santa while having a conversation with Larry Cable Guy. He grabs the letter. She tells him to not open the letter, but he's like, "I'll make sure to deliver to Santa personally." And he opened the letter, and he couldn't read the handwriting, but then he thought that she wanted this toy called, I forgot the name of the toy,
Okay.
Clarence or whatever. I don't know, the talking bear that basically talks in like many languages and even like says the names right. And so he tries whatever he can to find this bear and buy the bear. But the only issue though is that the stepfather knew about what's going on, and he wants to make sure that Larry Cable Guy doesn't get the bear. And he hires someone to
Mm.
buy every single
Jesus Christ.
one of those bears just to make him struggle to find the bear. And he'll do literally anything to get the bear. Even, I'm not kidding, dress up as a homeless person, dirty himself up just to go sit on Santa's lap and basically ask for the talking bear.
It was 2014 when this came out, so it's gotta be a vehicle for using Larry the Cable Guy and, like, his whole
Yeah.
shtick and letting him get in jokes that fit for him. Probably, like, seeing him as a hobo is funny because he's, like, on that particular line of hillbilly. But
Yeah.
I have to ask, besides the desperately trying to get a toy that they cannot get, which is a universal Christmas story and not distinct to Jingle All the Way itself, why not give this film a completely different title? It doesn't really feel like Jingle All the Way 2. That's like such a desperate desperate attempt to just call it something. I mean, this film was almost called Could It Be Christmas?
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Can you believe they didn't decide to go with that? Which is, a little bit silly. Did you stick around for the post-credit scene on Jingle All the Way 1?
I did. It was just like the one that involved like the wife and Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
Well, she asks him what she's gonna get him. She goes, "If this is what you did to get Jamie a present,
Yeah.
what did you do for mine?" Which implies that there would be a sequel where Arnold Schwarzenegger is desperately trying to get a present for his wife,
Yes.
and I'm sure some hilarity ensues.
Sadly, we didn't get that.
That post-credit scene didn't air in New Zealand. It aired everywhere, but for some reason New Zealand was like, "Just end the fucking film. Don't put that shit on there, sir."
Oh, yeah, especially since the movie has, like was critically panned by critics.
I know. And the credits are like 6 or 7 minutes. Who the fuck is sitting expecting a post-credit from this? Who even if I didn't know that there was supposed to be one, which I didn't see on my first watching, I wouldn't have sat for that.
Yeah, and this was, like, before Marvel, like, popularized the whole, like, waiting for end credits scene after the credits, so, like, who the hell wanted to just stay during the credits for a scene that wasn't even gonna happen?
How do you feel about post-credit scenes? For me, I'm often just like, "Fuck this shit. I'll watch it on YouTube later. I'm not sitting here anymore, you son of a bitch. This was a 3.5-hour comic book movie."
For me, like, at first, like, they were, like, pretty rewarding to watch just so, like, you
Mhm,
get yourself, like, excited for what's to come for the near future.
mhm.
Nowadays, like, they're alright. I'm not really, all that excited. I'll just basically just, like it's like tradition at this point, like, I'll just watch it just to see what they have going for it, whether something I'm excited for or something I'm just, like indifferent towards, so I kinda
Mm.
just, like, mellowed out, got less excited every time there's, like, a post-credit scene for
Mm.
Marvel or for DC films, especially since, like, DC has not been doing well so far, at least in my opinion, and Marvel, I know,
Yeah.
like, people are Marvel, I'm still a little bit on the binge ordeal, just kinda hanging in there, but I definitely will not but definitely have not been caught up with the shows at all. That's just, I think, a little too much time for me to work on,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm just indifferent towards, end credit scenes nowadays.
Yeah, the novelty has definitely worn
Mhm.
off. Although I think if somebody told me there was an end credit scene to Everything Everywhere All at Once, I would be super
Same
excited for
here.
that. So you're right, like, the context in which the film is, like, how much I like it matters. I do think that the Marvel Universe is a lot like anime, where, you really have to there's the manga, there's the light
Mhm.
novella, there's the series, there's the rebooted series, there's the live action. And so it does feel like the kind of fandom that, can be joyous because there's so much to consume. If you don't wanna read, you can look at I mean, if you don't wanna watch, you can look at a comic book, etcetera. But it's funny that people make fun of anime all the time for like, wow, 700 episodes, and yet it's starting to feel like Marvel's in that realm.
Yeah.
Star Wars too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely don't even know what's going on in Star Wars nowadays. I think I got as far as, like, Mandalorian season 1 and the final season of the Clone Wars show, and then I just tapped out. I just don't care about Star
Oh,
Wars
yeah.
nowadays.
No. You're talking to a Trekkie as well, so I'm gonna I'll be polite. It's available. It's stuff. There are some of them that I like. There are, but I'm way more willing to go like rewatch Next Generation 1,000 times than watch Accolade, which is new. But anyway, this is huge digression. I wanted to just cut right to my main
Mhm.
question. Your biggest fear about Jingle All the Way was that the kid was going to be written very annoying. And I had this like, I hadn't seen Jingle All the Way in a really long time, and I often think that kids are annoying. I watched this, and I know I have my opinion. What did you think? There are not too many kids to begin with. There's really just Jamie and the next door neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that while it did came true, it's not as much as I anticipated in the film.
Me
Like,
either.
Jake Lloyd's character was only in it for, like, I don't know, like, maybe, like, 30 minutes or less,
Mm-hmm.
and while every scene that he was in, except for, like, the final act, which we'll get into later, I did find him really annoying to watch, especially when he had that phone call with Arn his father is like, "What would you do to make a promise?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, "Oh, dear God. Hang in there, Brandon. Hang in there."
I will admit, because I found Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, he's clearly such a terrible father,
Yes.
such a terrible father. I mean, the idea that he He eats Turbo cereal. He watched Turbo Man movie. Like, you're never ever home. The idea that he doesn't even know what Turbo Man
Mhm.
is astonishingly bad indication of the kind of father he is. So during that conversation, I found myself kind of being like, yeah, Jamie, you fucking tell your father. I bet that felt emotionally good because he deserves to hear that.
Oh, yeah, for sure, especially since the father has been too focused on work and has been very neglectful towards his son. So in some ways, yeah, I was like, okay, there's some justifiable action towards his father for what he has done to
Mhm.
his son.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of a Christmas movie, like I said, it's very common for Christmas movies to have this like, I have to get this gift on this day for my son, and that will be the perfect thing for them.
Mm,
Instead of being there for them every other day of the year and knowing them as a person and perhaps already having purchased a gift, or you know what I mean? Like, there's so much more you could do than just this single day. So why is this such a common trope? And I started to think that like letting your kid down on Christmas is a little bit like letting them become an adult too soon, you
mhm.
know? And so is it really more a representation of parents are watching this film and they have an anxiety around like, "Oh no, my kid's gonna grow up too soon if I don't help them at Christmas." But like, how do you feel about Christmas movies where the protagonist is trying to be good on one day but has been shit the rest of the year?
I do that's I'm not particularly fond of that trope as well, especially since like his way of trying to gain back his love is through materialism. He's like, "I'm gonna help you buy
Mhm.
this. I'm gonna get you
Mhm.
this one thing you would love to do," and then Jamie was like, "Thanks, Dad. I love you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. You just love him just for materialism. Okay, cool, cool, cool." Even though like he's like barely there for like a lot of his life. He missed out on his karate event, the parade, some kind. It's just like one day isn't gonna be enough for like the 364 days you miss out on.
And to be selling, like, mattresses. You're not a doctor, you're not a
Mm.
lawyer, you're selling mattresses.
Yeah, and he was like super into it too. He's like, "You're my favorite. You're my number one favorite customer. You're my favorite
You're
number
my
one
number one
customer."
customer, but that brings me to an interesting thought as well. His accent is so clearly still his
Yes.
accent. No one in the film ever once mentions that this is a giant Austrian bodybuilder. And, like, again, at the end when he has a visor over his face, his wife doesn't recognize him, his child doesn't
Yeah.
recognize him. Nobody stops to think like, "Hey, does Turbo Man have an Austrian accent?" Like, is that how much of an absent father he's been?
Yeah, that's funny. I never really thought of it that way, but in that case, like he has the same power as John Cena. He could be invincible from his
He's
life. You can't
invisible.
see me.
Exactly. You know, that makes I keep thinking about Jingle All the Way
Mhm.
too being a WWE production, like, holy fucking Christ. Although The Big Show plays the giant Santa in the Santa Brawl scene, so there is a WWE member in
Mhm.
here. It's just oh my god, that's
It
astonishing.
it was very astonishing, especially when you compare Jingle All the Way 2 to Jingle All the Way 1. It's like, yeah, I don't think the second one really understand what made the first one, like, have a cult following, because it definitely did
Mhm,
not dive into the satire of commercialism, materialism that the first one did in some regard
mhm,
that people,
mhm,
like, rightfully like the film for that reason alone.
mhm. Yeah, it's interesting people go back and forth about being like, well, there's satire in this film, or are we interpreting the satire after the fact, or did the script get jammed through a system that needed to make it a Christmas film? And I wanted to ask you two questions about that. The first question being this film is rated
Mhm.
PG. It's supposed to be for kids. Do you feel like it's a PG kids movie?
Um Yes, in a way, because there are, like, a lot of, like, slapstick sequences involving Arnold.
Exactly.
And, of course, like,
Mhm.
Sinbad kind of portraying like those types of like 90s trope eras where he's like the
Mhm.
fast talking sidekick at some points, even though he's not fast talking in other
Mhm.
areas that like Robin Williams like popularized it because of Aladdin. And so
Mhm.
like whenever he's talking like really fast, the kids will find funny because I'm like, oh, look at him, he's like talking fast, he's like getting angry, ha 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 ha. And of course,
Yeah, all of his lines were ad-libbed. He was ad-libbing all of his lines,
oh,
and Arnold Schwarzenegger was ad-libbing his responses back.
okay.
So most of that is like Sinbad doing stand-up, which I found hilarious because I thought that they were Pesci
Hmm.
lines. Like, it read so much like he was doing Joe Pesci,
Yes.
that he was making that shit up on the spot.
Insane. Okay, that does make a lot of sense because it did feel like there's literally just scenes where it's just Sinbad's just doing his thing, and I'm just like, is anybody just gonna stop him or something like that? But no, he's just going on.
He chokes a woman at one point.
Yeah,
It's very strange, right?
I'm like, dude, there's something wrong with him.
But you're right. So it's very childish the way that, like, oh, he chokes a woman, but there's no repercussions. The cop has the bomb blow up in his
Yes,
hands like it's a Looney
yes, I
Tunes.
agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so if you're watching Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's a big ass
Hmm.
bodybuilder. If you're gonna make him do something comedic, you would have to assume slapstick,
Yes,
physicality. He's a physical guy,
yes.
right?
And there are some moments where he has some, like, reactions that are extremely over the top that kids will find funny that,
Mhm.
quite frankly, I did find them funny whenever he had those, like, big bulging eyes, like something bad's going to happen. I'm just like, "That's funny." Arnold can definitely do comedic.
Especially because the director shot this in such a specific way for those.
Mhm,
It's either always shot from below or always shot in a tight.
mhm.
So you're getting either a hilarious look at this gigantic man from below him, point of view of real life, or literally all like 90% of the frame is his face.
I still remember that one scene where his wife was like, "If you're planning on getting the Turbo Man, there you good luck on that because they're about to be sold out." And then she turns the lights up, and you just see these lights just shot on his eyes, and you just like the oh, kind of, kind of like bang, and I'm like, that is such a funny looking shot. I love that.
Absolutely. It is kind of impressive how much of his face is part of his
Hmm.
acting. Because he mostly got hired before that for his
Hmm.
body. In his first film, he has his lines 100% dubbed over because he can't speak English well enough. Like, he's only ever done 7 comedies of his, like, 50, I think 49 films he's at right now, so only 7 of them are ever comedies, and they're all physical. So it makes a lot of sense, but what would you say to hearing that Arnold Schwarzenegger was, like, in an Aaron Sorkin film or something like a real high patois, witty film?
That would be a very interesting because 'cause I know he can act very well, as I mentioned in the first part,
Mhm. Mhm.
and there's, like, this one movie I've seen him in where he does a dramatic performance called Maggie, which was a zombie film about him trying to cater with his
Yes.
zombie daughter, and it does show that he can act very well in a dramatic
Mhm.
performance. Whether or not the movie
Mhm.
is good or not, I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I have no idea, but I definitely remember Arnold doing a dramatic performance that actually was interested, really was liking, and so for him to be in something like an Aaron Sorkin film or any other films he's done, I mean, he has done films with James Cameron where they show a
Mhm.
little bit of his capabilities. I wouldn't be too surprised. I would be surprised in some regard, but I would be like, this would be a very different step in his career, and I would be
Mhm.
very interested in how he would present himself in those types of films.
Yeah, I think a lot of it would have to do with
Mhm.
pronunciation and leaning into his, dialect 'cause his English is as good as it's ever going to
Yes.
get. In fact, I think it's probably part of the comedic choice that he can't say the word turbo.
Yeah.
And the thing is called Turbo Man, because in the original script, it was still called Turbo Tom, and they took out the second T to make it a little easier to say, but they left turbo. It's turbo, and I think that that's al also part of, like, it's funny to hear him say words weird.
Yeah, or even, like, Jamie, and it's just like more pronunciation on the A. It's like Jamie.
Exactly, that's why at the end when Turbo Man says, "Jamie, come up here to get the toy," it is you don't know that that is your father, the only human who pronounces your name like that?
He knows my name.
He knows my name.
Oy.
Oh my god, hilarious. Is this your favorite comedic role with Arnold, or have you seen him in something where you think he might have been better as a comedian?
I think he was better as a comedian in Kindergarten Cop. I think that one's better in my opinion. I think there's like a
Mhm.
lot more funnier moments and noticeable lines. Like
Quoted lines,
yeah,
yeah.
like it's not
Yeah.
a Duma.
Sabatuma. Do you know, that's actually really funny. I think there are several types of comedians whose comedy hits because of the way that they say words.
Mhm,
Like, even in this movie when he says, "Put down the cookie!" It's, like, such a hilarious thing that you wanna parrot it.
mhm.
And I think, like, Hannibal Buress, some of the stuff that he says is funny because of the way that he says it. Mitch Hedberg, another comedian who does that.
Yeah, yeah, and if there's a lot of like action hero figures like Arnold Schwarzenegger that can do funny moments, like Sylvester Stallone can be very
Oh,
funny as well, especially like in the Rocky films, whether it
yeah. Mhm,
be both dramatic and comedic as well.
mhm.
There's like a
Yeah.
and John Cena, for example, he
God!
can really act very well.
His comedic timing is insultingly good to established comedians.
Yes.
He'll steal a whole fucking movie out, yes, and that Amy Schumer movie that he's in, he
Mhm.
steals it.
I agree, 100%.
Oh my god, and Stallone is a great choice as well for a lot of the times it's funny because of the way he says something.
Mhm. Yeah, because when you brought up the put that cookie down, that was legit my favorite part in the whole film. And I think it's just because the banter between Arnold and Phil Hartman, and Phil Hartman was just so fucking funny in that film. Every scene he's in, it always makes me chuckle or laugh out loud, especially when he was just so into those cookies. I'm like, dude, do you need a minute with your those cookies? Because like, holy shit, I've never seen anyone who just acts like that towards cookies for that matter, unless you're Santa. But
The double entendre there is, like, heavy, and everything about the success of the neighbor, the Phil Hartman character's lines is in his delivery,
Mhm.
and he's given this role because he didn't fit for Myron. They wanted him in Myron, but they didn't believe him as asshole enough. So he's leaning into how nice this the casting thinks he is, but he's actually an asshole. Like, there's
Yeah.
those break moments, so he really leaned into it well. Phil Hartman is one of my favorite actors, and I can't encourage you enough to go see more films that he is in.
Mhm.
This is his second to last live action film that he does. The other one that he does is actually something Heroes. It's a mostly stop animation with little action figures that come to life, kind of like Toy Story, and he plays one of the humans that are actually part of that story.
Oh,
So it's not
toy
even a
soldiers.
really big. Yes! It's not even a really big role, but again, he steals it. Um, it is a real shame. Do you know how he passed?
I do not remember right now, as of right now. No.
His wife had a drug addiction and was taking SSRIs at the same time. The rumor has it that Andy Dick supplied her with additional drugs, even though she was in sobriety, and she cracked and shot her husband. She killed Phil Hartman and then killed herself. So it was a murder suicide
Oh, damn.
with the children in the house.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah, so it is incredibly sad how young and how needless it was for this death. And that's part of the reason why so many people in Hollywood hate Andy Dick, and that is why Andy Dick is noted as being such a terrible person. It's also why John Lovitz got into a bar fight with him once and almost broke his face open.
Oh, I thought it was for like for other reasons for Andy to consider the fact he is a controversial figure, but I didn't know about that part, so that does make more sense.
Oh, it's not just that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
many reasons, but part of the reason is that he contributed to the death of such an amazing comedian and
Okay.
actor, which
Yeah.
is sad. Did you to tangent really
Mhm.
fast and quickly. This is the first ever role for Chris Parnell, who plays the toy worker in the first toy scene when they're looking for the action figure, and he just laughs in his face over and over again.
Oh, okay.
Do you know who Chris Parnell is? Did you recognize him?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't know as on the top of my head right now.
If you pulled up a picture, you probably would recognize him. He is a very established voice actor doing Bob's Burgers voices. He plays Cyril on Archer. He's also a Saturday Night Live member. He was in 30 Rock as Dr. Spaceman. He is a very established character actor. So to be able to see, like, oh shit, this is the first time he's ever been in something, is kind of nice. To bookend, like, if we're seeing the end of Phil Hartman, we are also seeing the beginning of Chris Parnell.
Gotcha. I mean, he was he
Mhm.
definitely made some form of impression because, like, when I was seeing the scene with him just laughing, I'm just like, "What the hell is happening here?" He's just like, like just
Yeah, again, such a tight shot and, like, angled up.
mhm. Such a wild scene. Just and everyone's just laughing alongside him too. It's just I'm just like Arnold's just over here just like, "Am I taking crazy pills? What is happening?"
But that's the reality of, like, again, this is such a common Christmas trope that somebody's searching on the day of, like, "Are you fucking for real right now?" And I have worked retail
Mhm.
day before Christmas, and to get asked a question like that when you are literally moments from sheer mental breakdown, all you can do is just laugh, 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 laugh. Have you ever worked Christmas retail?
No, I have not. You know, closest thing I ever worked on, just at least like dealing with customers, is just fast food restaurants. And I mean, there are points like where people ask us in terms of like, "Oh, are you open on like holiday sessions or I don't know, all that stuff." I'm just like, "What do you think?"
Mm, yeah, you think? Yeah. Are we gonna be open at midnight on Christmas? No.
No, I
Oh, man.
and it's just such a wild scene too, because I know there's like a bunch of like crazy shenanigans going on in that film. One
Mhm.
prime example is the ball scene where
Yes,
the
I
whole
wanted to talk about
the
that.
whole like crowd was going at each other, including Arnold. And that moment we were just like, this is probably like a wacky like Christmas comedy film. This isn't wacky. This is Black Friday, and they're trying to look for their PS5.
This is the reality of it, like, if humans could just behave for a single moment, and yet again, like I say, it's the day before Christmas, how many people have done this?
Mm,
A ton of
yeah.
people. Like, just get in line and get a ball, we could do this, and when he's on the floor fighting with Sinbad, there's, like, 6 other balls that he's lying on top of, just grab those instead, it's so petty.
Is very, very petty. And then like Anna's just lying to the crowd with Sinbad. And he's like, "He got two! He got two! Let's get them!"
Yeah. It's hilarious physical comedy though,
Mm,
and then chasing the ball down the stairs into the ball pit, like and the little girl who he encounters who doesn't really have lines,
mm.
does a pretty damn good job for being her age and lineless.
Yeah, and she just being a child, just messing with a ball, and then he was like, "Come here, little girl," and then the parents, rightfully so, like beat the shit out of Arnold because they thought he was being creepo.
'Cause he's a fucking creepo, what is he doing
Yeah,
there?
exactly.
So that brings me to my second question I wanted to ask you regarding is this movie for kids? So we have established the comedy is slapstick.
Hmm.
It's Looney Tunesian and it works. There are parts that are funny. I totally laugh at that. But also, at its absolute core, this movie is about Christmas sucking. It also is about a guy trying to buy a present. It shows multiple fake Santas.
Hmm.
If I was a kid, wouldn't I just believe that Jamie would get Turbo Man from Santa because he's a good kid? Why would this have to happen? If this is a kids movie, aren't there huge plot elements that would be bad for a kid to watch?
That's a good point, actually, especially since like kids nowadays are just basically think themselves like Santa will give them the gift, not their parents, essentially. And so
Yeah.
watching that film, it'll give them this like weird ideology, be like, why are there so many like Santas here? I thought there's just one Santa. And why is like Arnold going against Santa? Like Santa has like so many powers, they would like beat him to a pulp.
Like, why is any of this necessary?
I mean, because in the satire is definitely more so for adults, but in terms of some of the
Mhm.
slapstick, it's definitely is for kids. But at the same time, it's like the messaging behind that film is a little concerning for kids.
I mean, there's only 2 kids in the movie.
Mm,
They don't have very much screen time. It's mostly about the adults and the hell that is brought on by Christmas.
mm.
What do you think the message of this movie is? If it's a Christmas movie, they usually have messages.
Okay, the message of the story.
I mean, there might not be one. It's questionable. Anything you come up with, I feel like you're doing better than the filmmakers.
I guess it was trying to be the whole it doesn't matter what you get. The real gift is the parents who take care of the child by the end of it.
Mhm,
But the only
mhm.
thing is though about it is that the message was so muddled and felt very last minute phoned in that you won't even think it's about that until the very last second because the whole movie is just materialism wins the child or commercialism wins the day essentially, even though it's trying to be like a
Mhm.
satire at some points. But at the other realms, I'm like, I feel like the satire is not fully realized. I know for a fact that well, I remember the movie was not originally meant to be a satire commercialism. It was only until Chris Columbus who rewrote the film to add in the satire of that commercialism or materialism for this movie.
Well, see, that's where we start to get into the lawsuit issue.
Okay.
Because who actually wrote this movie? I mean, it's Randy Cornfield
Mhm.
is the name on it. That's who the production company says wrote this movie. There was a lawsuit. I'm going to just go over to my tab because I forgot the guy's name. Brian Webster, a Detroit high school biology teacher. Now, he says that he sent a script called Could This Be Christmas to Fox and that they didn't use it, but that Kornfeld read his script and then wrote what is Jingle All the Way based on the script that he had sent them. And this is part of the reason why most most production companies right now won't accept scripts.
Mhm.
They don't advertise for. They will send them back to you because if you send them something and it's similar to something that they have in production, they could claim that you stole from
Mhm.
them and they don't want to do that. So either it could be totally common psychological thing, parallel invention.
Mhm.
Randy Kornfeld just comes up with this story at the same time they happen to have a script because they have tons of scripts.
Mhm.
Brian Webster says he wrote it based on the commercialism he was witnessing when he saw Cabbage Patch dolls being sold in the 80s. Randy Kornfeld says that he kind of wrote it based on the thing around his mother and father-in-law were trying to get a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger for his son and he thought that would be a funny start off point. And it's not really super about the commercialism or the fact that people got trampled at malls, but it kind of was the starting point.
Yeah.
Of course, the lawsuit winds up going in favor of the high school teacher because there were 36 points of similarity, but then a couple years later, they overturn it. And it doesn't even matter because the extra sad part is when they ruled in favor of the high school teacher, he had died about a week prior.
Oh, no!
So nobody ever got any of the money. I believe it was $19 million that were awarded.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, $19 million to Murray Hill Publishing, but nobody ever winds up seeing that, and it winds up getting overturned, so in the history annals, Randy Kornfield wrote this script, and you're right, Christopher Columbus said he got involved at some point, and they definitely tried to polish it to make it seem like it was oh, at the end, when he gives away the Turbo Man, it's because he has Turbo Man at home,
Mhm.
and we hopefully assume Arnold is going to be home more, although why would he change anything about his life.
Oh my goodness. It was I remember, watching a review video of Jingle All the Way after watching this movie, because for nostalgia
Mhm,
reason, because that's how I came across this movie was from
mhm.
Nostalgia Critic who talked about this film, and I always thought it was
Oh,
pretty
awesome.
funny, and going back to it did felt very, classic in some regard.
Mhm,
So, yeah, when you brought
mhm.
up that point, I couldn't help but think of, at the end where where Jamie's like, "That's like I love you, Dad," and then Nostalgia Critic doing impression on it's like, "So long, Jamie. I'm come back to neglect you some more."
Exactly. Exactly. Oh god, it's so fucking hilarious. And I mean, there isn't even Christmas in this movie. This movie ends before Christmas.
That's a good point too. Yeah.
Like, oh, what I really want to talk about is the big end scene, the parade scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had said to you in our first part, there's 1,500 extras in this.
Mhm.
What was the largest extra scene ever? Because I thought, like, maybe this is pretty close. And I got to admit, it's not even close. Just to bookend that and tell you, Richard Attenborough's 84 Gandhi
Mm.
has the Guinness World Record because in the funeral sequence, there are 300,000 extras.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. The scene was filmed January in 1981. That's just the 33rd anniversary of Gandhi's funeral. And it had 94,560 contracted actors. And then 200,000, the remainder, the over 200,000 remainder, were volunteers. It took 11 cameras, 20,000 feet of film, and a single morning to film what would wind up being 126 seconds of the film.
Jesus fucking Christ, damn. And I haven't seen that movie too, but it's been on my watch list for years, so that's actually pretty interesting.
Consider that a reason to go see it. It is quite an astonishing
Okay.
film. But this one still has a lot of extras
Yes.
and was filmed on a closed set in Los Angeles because they couldn't, they needed to use helicopters to get certain angles and they couldn't ensure the safety of Jamie, the actor, in that, in that kind of dangerous scene where he's hanging from above.
Mhm.
If they had actually hung him above a street, which seems like fine.
While also Sinbad just doing his thing, even to the point that he made a Vertigo reference, and I'm just like,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure kids will watch Vertigo. Yeah.
Yes, and it almost makes no sense at all, even when he's making the joke. But that is the moment in time when I went, "Motherfucker is ad-libbing. This is not a written line. That is not a written line." And so, very good to call out that line. Very good.
Mhm.
It's so the whole film is shot in 6 weeks, by the
Okay.
way, which is part of the turnaround. They had less than a year to get it edited and to make action figures. They did make a whole action figure for this, which is part of why I think it did so badly when it came out, because people thought like, "Holy fuck, is this just like He-Man? This is just a commercial for an action figure that didn't exist until you made this thing." Like, mm. So, of the 6 weeks, 3 weeks are spent on this single scene.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a lot. It films in April. That's why even though it's Minnesota and it's the day before Christmas,
Mhm.
there's no fucking snow. It's beautiful, bright, clear day. You know every single one of those actors is sweating balls because everybody's dressed in, like, winter gear.
Yeah. It's just real, quote unquote realistic because we don't get snow until like
Realistic.
February.
And technically, the Minnesota parade that it is replicating normally happens at night because, like, it gets dark very early.
Okay.
That's another thing. This seems to be the longest day in human history, right? Like, it's bright all day. He does so much.
Fast and Furious 6 took notes of it. We're like, well, let's put that with the airplane and make that the longest like highway ever.
Too true, too true. But all of this said, this scene is really kind of fun. I mean, it is the culmination of everything. There's a lot of bits that are like, have you ever seen Repo Man?
I have not, but it's really interesting you brought that up because when I was watching your podcast, I definitely remember
Mhm.
you talked about that film many, many times. And when I saw that there was a Criterion Collection sale going on, I was like scrolling through it. I was like, okay, there's some movies I'm gonna go get. I'm gonna go get Anatomy of the Fall. I'm gonna go get this film. Oh yeah, I still have this in my cart. And then I came across Repo Man, and I was like, you know what? KT's always talk about this film all the time. Imma buy it, and so I did.
Yeah. Oh, you must tell me how you feel once you see it. It is when you see it, you'll be able to think about this conversation, which will be hilarious. It ends in a similar kind of fantasy kind of ending where you're just like, whoa, that's a shift. Because here we have Schwarzenegger on the jetpacks.
Mm.
I mean, jetpacks don't exist, but what do you think about that?
We had jetpacks before GTA 6. No. It is very, very wild to just see, like, this parade that, like, has some money put into it, you could definitely tell, and then there's just this expensive-looking Iron Man-looking jetpack, and what they do with it was sur the wildest thing in this film is just Arnold just trying to maneuver this jetpack, and it's all over the place. That's where the whole, like, wackiness of kids be like, "It's funny," and and then I watched it, I was like, "Yeah, this is definitely for kids," but in a way, it is, like, with a bunch of other wackier aspects, at best, amusing to watch. Just because
Mhm.
you just kinda, like, watch this, you're just like, "Wow, this is really out there. This is just really just trying to be like Tom and Jerry or even like even more crazy slapstick moments like that." And it's just Arnold just like not knowing how to fly this thing and going through the hitting the buildings with the most strongest helmet ever and the flag turning him
Yeah,
round and round and round. It's
yes.
insanity.
Looney Tunesian.
Yes.
Very, very. Like it's like Wile E. Coyote.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, he's almost in the stratosphere at some point. Like he's still just a mattress salesman guy. The previous guy is barely alive. And like, guys, is he
And
okay?
people forget that he's a mattress man, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, he is mattress man," but we keep making him look like Arnold will do these types of things.
And like the parade itself, there's the parade float for police with a policeman on a trampoline. Did you see that?
I did saw that. Those policemen are just like, "It's fine. We're gonna do some backflips on this trampoline."
If you're part of the all cops are bad movement, this is a decent movie for you because the cops are portrayed as absolutely incompetent. Except for on trampolines.
Yeah, yeah, they were
They're very competent
they
on
were
that.
pretty
Very, very
skilled
good
on
on that.
that. But the bomb squad wise, need a little few more years on that one.
Yeah. And the motorcycle cop who just can't quite catch Schwarzenegger no matter what he does. And like that's another interesting aspect of Christmas movies that I wonder if it isn't a little unhinged. I am Christian, so I celebrate Christmas and I have since I was a
Mhm.
kid. Are you as well?
Yes.
So there's this trope that I've never really stopped to look at when I was a kid that I'm more as an adult looking at, where like Arnold Schwarzenegger breaks a lot of laws trying to get this kid's toy. And I watched an episode of Reno 911 last night where it was the same exact thing. One of the characters is trying to get a toy for their son, Nicolaj, and they're cops. And they're cops breaking the law. And as viewers, we're supposed to just be like, on Christmas, if you are in search of a toy for a child, it is okay. And the movie even gets to that point where he goes to rob the next door neighbor and steal the kid's toy for his own toy. And they're like, is that too far? Like how far is too far when it's in the sake of
Mhm.
Christmas?
And then, like, Arnold just looks at the toy, he's like, "What am I doing?" Puts it back,
Mhm.
but then
Barely puts it back.
the next scene, he punches a reindeer.
And the reindeer goes, ow. The reindeer
Yeah, he's like,
says,
"Oh."
ow.
And then, like, Arnold's supposed to have his one-liners, and then all he said was, "You started this." I'm like,
Yes.
"Okay."
And
Lame!
the
Boo!
two of them are drinking beer later. There are several things that they do to try and be like, hey, Minnesota, where they're drinking a very famous type of grain beer that's popular in Minnesota. Although sometimes they're like, the scene will start in a location in St. Paul and then suddenly be in Minneapolis, at like or just a different location. So it's all over the place, but that
Mm.
scene with the beer felt very much like, oh fuck, we need to reallure the audience to Schwarzenegger. Yeah, he punched this reindeer, but they're friends. It was just like, guys punch each other.
Yeah, we punched each other, but let's go grab a beer later, right?
It's all in the sake of Christmas. And even at the end of the parade, when the wife is like now hot again for her husband, who is Like, look, okay, if I fucking caught my significant other in our neighbor's house trying to steal their kid's present the day before Christmas and accidentally burning it down, we're getting a fucking divorce. You have not been home for almost a year and you sell mattresses.
And what do? Go burn other people's houses. Who does that?
Who does that? But at the end, she sees him as Turbo Man, and she's like, "My husband is your husband isn't Turbo Man. He's the guy playing Turbo Man in a random street parade."
All of a sudden, she's just like, "Oh, Turbo Man. Oh, okay," and just like trying to rub his chest with her hands.
Played very well by Rita Wilson,
Mhm.
Tom Hanks's wife, in what is not the most dimensional role. I think when the parade scene starts, they must have told every actor, because they're not actually looking at the parade in their one shot with the close up, laugh, laugh. And Rita Wilson's character is like unhinged level of laughing while she's watching. She's just like,
Oh,
like it's a parade, honey.
I didn't see that part, but
Oh,
that must have been interesting.
oh. I think because I'm a female actor, when there's a movie that only has like one main character, one character that's female, I'm often like honed in on, all right, if I got hired to do this shit role, how would I save it? What
Yeah.
would I do with it? And like, there's not much there for her, but she does a pretty decent job. Often when I'm watching a movie that is questionable, I like to write a second version of the film in my head. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we misunderstood and this is what was actually happening? And there are two tangents that I thought would make this film a darker, grittier reboot.
Oh.
The first one, what if the last scene, which does get comically slapstick with the jetpack, is like a Jacob's Ladder scenario, and Arnold has long passed in his search for the toy and all of the insanity that has ensued to him in the brawl with the Santas. Maybe he was beaten unconscious, and this is just his fevered brain dream of what might have happened.
Oh my god, that would be quite a turn of events, especially with the jetpack being like the wackiest thing ever in the whole film. It's like Arnold was just in a coma just because the amount of Santas he went up against, and this is just the whole manifestation of his psyche, especially when he did see Jamie as a bum mailman that's dressed the same way as Sinbad because he's like, "Here's to you, Dad." Starts drinking alcohol. I'm like, psychological. Hmm?
Like, what if Sinbad's an imaginary character? What if Sinbad was never even there in the whole film? He's just tipping to nothing because he's lost it. So I was watching this and I thought a lot of the film Falling Down with Michael Douglas, which is about a guy who's trying to get to his daughter's a divorced father trying to get to his daughter's birthday.
It's on my watch list, but I know exactly. I've heard of the film because it has him as like an anti-hero some way. Yeah.
Yeah. Very gritty,
Hmm.
very violent. And if this film had become more violent, it could have been that. But again, we're watching a man on a day where everything he is trying to do just keeps failing.
Hmm.
And like, what if he just cracks under the mental pressure of all that and invents Sinbad the mailman?
Especially when Sinbad just acts like a complete just nutball in this film, and then everybody's just like, "Yeah, okay, just moving on, moving on." It's like
Yeah, chokes a woman.
chokes a woman, acts like nothing happened. I'm just like, okay, you go straight to jail for just attempt assault.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he drives by in the mail truck and waves at him while he's hit the cop bike, and like nobody's there. You're looking at nothing. The cop didn't see anything. Like, oh, Arnold. And my other thought, have you seen the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
I have, yes.
Okay. What if Sinbad's son died many years ago, and there is no child he's trying to get that toy to?
That would be a depressing tale that would kind of make sense in a way because it's almost like this type of loser dude that would do anything just for get a
Mhm,
doll, but then
mhm,
it turns out that like just to regain back his childhood memories that he missed out on because he never got a doll
mhm.
or action figure that his father said he would, but he didn't give him that. So this is his way of like regaining his childhood back by any means necessary. So that would be very interesting if went with that route too.
Yeah, yeah, and the toy that he describes is actually a real toy that did exist when he was a child. So again, he's ad-libbing his lines. That's he's just his method acting. And also like Planes, Trains and Automobiles happens on Thanksgiving, so this would be another like it's on Christmas, and it's not even about the toy. He's reaching out again and again to Arnold as like I just want some human connection. I mean, at the end, he gets the toy
Mhm.
from Jamie, but he still goes to jail. So, like, I don't think that toy is getting to his son as much as like, oh, that's nice. Like, I don't think that's working out real well.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because it really made things a hell of a lot worse for the mailman than originally attended. Even to the point that he basically had a bomb delivery. Like,
Yeah, it's so dark at certain points that I'm like, there is a really gritty film if we do this from Sinbad's perspective.
mm-hmm. That was especially how progressively unhinged he gets in some regard that it could go a little farther than that. That would be make for a very interesting psychological study.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had mentioned earlier that this film was called "Could This Be Christmas?" When films are put into other foreign markets, the title is not always literally translated, especially when it's like a colloquialism. Jingle all the way doesn't really make sense in other languages. The most common translated version of this title contains the word promise, either like Christmas promise or a promise is a promise, which is what it was in Italy. Promised is promised in Germany. The promised gift in Ecuador. So I think a lot of what people are thinking about this movie is the idea that like the dad has made a promise to their kid. Like I don't I feel like so much of that focus removes it from being a kids movie because it's too much about like how adults handle the pressure of Christmas.
Yeah, I agree, especially when they were too focused on everything else when they forgot about their children that they will do anything they can to appease that child and just I don't know. It is a pretty it does get quote unquote stressful, I feel like, for adults who can relate with that in
Mhm.
some regard, especially with Black Friday and how we see how that goes with people just fighting each other for over a gift that is probably gonna be gone in like 2, 3 years, I guess, at best.
Yeah, why not just tell the kid you can get it after Christmas? Why not be practical about it? It's I guess it's because you wanna save their childhood. It's way more than the practicality of a gift. Do you feel like Christmas stresses you out?
Um, for me personally, no.
Mhm.
I'm a very laid back person. So when it comes to like Christmas, I I do something that like my family rarely does, and that's plan something. And I try to like plan it out where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give this person this at this day. I'm gonna give this person this at this day. And if I end up forgetting to give them gifts on this specific day, it doesn't really bother me all that much because I'm there to celebrate Christmas with my family or with my girlfriend. Like that's all it really mattered to me. It's the whole like family bondage, connection really that
Mhm.
really makes it all the more difference to me personally than just materialism for me.
That brings me to a very interesting question, which is, do you think that people who have your viewpoint on Christmas can really relate to this movie?
um I guess maybe in some ways they can relate with it, especially with the struggles of Christmas. And if there's like people like me who watch this type of movie, they can I maybe relate some fashion. I mean, at best, they're probably gonna be like, "Oh, I know someone who dives into the pressures of Christmas, and they'll do anything for this person per se." And there are gonna be a lot of like amusing moments for them, but at the same time, they're probably just gonna be like, wow, Arnold is just a bad parent. Like Jamie is just just getting a little annoying, or like, and the wife is just barely there, or
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like whether or not you see this representation and you think, "Wow, this is what a terrible version of humanity to show me
Mhm,
on Christmas." And I really
mhm.
hate Christmas. I worked too much retail. So for me, I'm like, "Ha ha, the mirror held up to the trash that is humanity." But I realize, like, that's not everybody's favorite flavor.
Yeah, in some ways, Christmas brings up their worst self, and they
They should be shown this. I'm curious, what is your favorite scene and what's your least favorite scene?
So my favorite scene, I did bring it up at one point in the part two, is the put that cookie down. I just love the chemistry Phil Hartman has with Arnold Schwarzenegger going
Mhm.
on, where Phil Hartman is just trying to go after his wife, even though there's like so many other mothers that want to fall over heels for him, and it's like, oh, you can go clean my plumbing or stuff like that.
Players got game,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And there was a part in that as well where he Phil was trying to, like, grab the cookies and eat them, and he is like, "Ah!" And then the kids were just cheering, and he's like, "Put that down!" I was like, "Whoa."
That's the real Phil, that's him in reality, he's just putting on the other show.
Like, it's so good. It's almost like, in a way, I do kinda wish there was a little bit more Phil Hartman just because of how unbelievably funny he is, and when he, like, talks with Arnold, I feel there was more of a chemistry going down with those 2 than, at least my opinion, Arnold with Sinbad.
Mhm,
Well, I feel like there's not much going on for that. Even though they're both trying, I could definitely see the attempt of them trying, but in terms of, like, bringing comedic effect to it, Phil and Arnold bring out the best in each other, especially even Arnold's wackier side when, again, like he said, "Put that cookie down now!" To the point it's like a meme where people reference that scene so many times, even made a This Is Sparta remix onto that line as well. Like,
mhm,
if they people who have never seen that film know that scene, and it's a classic scene
mhm.
for a good reason. It is genuinely the funniest part of the whole film, and I love when it does get wacky like that.
Yeah, I agree with the studio that it would have been very difficult to shoot the majority of the action scenes and physical comedy that they wanted if they had hired Joe Pesci, which was their original
Mhm,
choice. So it was just too short. Even though they had done Danny DeVito with him in Twins, it just would have been
mhm.
hard. I get that. But I completely disagree with the decision to not let Phil Hartman play that character because you're right. This movie is at its best when Schwarzenegger and Hartman are playing off of each other. It is just transcendent. And the over the top, he's almost like the way he delivers his lines, his lower jaw just opens and shuts like he's a Muppet. He's like a Guy Smiley, like or Matt Berry, where he's like ha 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 ha, and it fucking works. It's the highlight. How? It's you're right. We should have had more.
Yeah, I definitely think we should have more of them, but what they do with them is glorious at its best.
Mhm. Before we go to worst, I wanna include an honorable mention. I did like the Santa fight scene just because of how absurd that is. It's so freaking ridiculous. And you've got James Belushi, you get the Big Show. You also have Vern Troyer in there. The tiniest Santa is the actor who played Mini-Me. So these are, like, beginning roles, so you get a lot of little flashes of people in there, and it's surreally absurd, and I enjoyed that.
Okay, I knew I recognized that guy because I kept looking at him. I was
Mhm.
like, he looks so familiar. Like I've seen him some stuff, but now you mentioned that, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the Santa fight is definitely one of the more amusing parts of the film. I didn't think it's really uproariously hilarious, but I do think it was kind of amusing to watch Arnold just fight a bunch of Santas, use
Yes.
a candy cane as a way to hit all the Santas in like one hit. Has a Santa with nunchucks going after Arnold. It was like very amusing to watch. It was pretty stupid, but I think I was a little aware of it, especially when they involved the mini Santa just like thrown across the room essentially. I was like, wow, okay, this is crazy.
And what are they making? They're supposedly making like really popular toys that people are going to want. They're still making them right now, even though it's the day before Christmas. They seem to be making giant stuffed bears and fake cop badges.
Yeah, and then when they do manage to, like, kind of make toys, they're, like, duds. So I'm like, "Are
Okay.
they're making fake toys?"
But for me, that was the moment when it really felt like, guys, it's like the commercials in Starship Troopers. Are you not aware that this is not a positive Christmas movie? That this is not a satire? The main character is beating up hundreds of Santas in a like slapstickian fight. And you're just like, I don't know if this is really about the Christmas spirit. I probably not.
Yeah, I could definitely see there's some points I was like, "This is definitely a satire of of commercialism being anti-Christmas." I was like, "Okay,
Mhm.
these are the points I definitely do find very amusing to watch."
And again, it's not like the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's
Mhm.
like, ha ha ha, this is funnier than I thought it was going to be. So worth note. But anyway, worst scene.
So the worst part for me, honestly, and I hate to break it to it, but almost every scene that Jake Lloyd was in. I can't stand those types of child characters that the director puts in almost of his films where he directs these kids to be the most annoying little shits ever. And I
Mhm.
don't understand why that's a thing he does that's supposed to be amusing. It's because every time that like almost every time Lloyd is in the film, he always like talks in a way that's like just trying to be like way too uppity, way too like energized, which I get for kids. I get that. But it's like in a way, it's like the tone of it, I'm just like, "Oh my goodness," it's like almost like nails on a chalkboard, especially when they had the scene of
Mhm.
him on the phone with Arnold about the whole promise thing. Yes, I do agree, like, yeah, Arnold is made a horrible mistake, but at the same time, I'm like every time I hear this kid, I'm like, "Arnold, just hang up the phone, you know what you did wrong, just stop." So just don't I can't listen to this anymore because 'cause I'm just about to start twitching my eye a little bit, I'm just like,
I think it would have been way better delivered if the child had delivered the lines with disappointment instead
Yes.
of anger.
I agree,
Yeah.
I agree. And there's like one time where I didn't mind him very much. It was at the very end when he was like running away from Sinbad. I think there's some points I was like, okay, he's not too bad. I don't know, that's just like the the hashtag fuck them kids persona in me that's like, oh yeah, like this is tolerable because he's in danger and all that stuff. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know, but it's like in the scene he was just not nearly as annoying. And then like at the end, like I think when he gave Sinbad the toy, I think he was fine in that one too. Those are the only times where I was tolerating him, but most of the time it was like really, like, hurting my ears at some points, and which is interesting because, like, in the sequel, if there's one aspect I do think it was a little better was the child performance. Granted, the child was still annoying, but it wasn't, like, ear-gratingly annoying. Like, I can tell, like, this one is still uppity-bubbly, but it wasn't, like, way too much for me to handle. I could be able
Oh,
to
yeah.
handle it. It was, like, appropriate, but yeah, with the first film, I was like, and again, I don't blame Jake Lloyd performances for this. I think it's just the director's fault. I don't think he really quite knew how to direct child performers
Mhm,
in a way.
mhm.
So I don't blame Jake Lloyd for any of this. Like, I just wish he had a better director to direct him in their films.
And in fairness, that is 20 years later. That is 2014 that Jingle All the Way 2 comes out. So the
Mm.
portrayal of children vastly different
Yes.
in media and cinema at the time. And I think the 90s, especially the mid 90s, kids were kind of always portrayed that way. I did an episode recently on Emperor's New Groove,
Mhm.
and the two children of the main character is they are beyond annoying in every single scene, and they're barely in the movie. And I turned to my friend who wanted to watch it, and I was like, explain, explain, explain. And she said, I really think that this is the way that kids were shown at the time. And so for kids watching this movie, they wanted to see themselves, and that kind of like broke the tension between the story of the adult narrative. Here we have our Jingle All the Way, like we're trying to find our toy,
Hmm.
and brought the kids back in because they were seeing themselves. I'm with you though. I don't think kids were ever that annoying.
Hmm.
And I I feel bad for this actor. What's the kid's name again?
Jake Lloyd.
Jake Lloyd. Bless his heart. I mean, we do know that he goes through hell as Anakin.
Yes.
And part of that is in this film, everything is shot so close. So when we do get talking scenes with Jake, it's so close to his face, you get his whole face.
Hmm.
And there's a word in German, Backpfeifengestickt. And it means a face that cries out to have a fist put into it. And that basically means, I'm so sorry. There's something about your face that makes me want to punch you, that makes me hate you. You have Backpfeifengestickt. And that is kind of what I felt with the scenes with him. He could have been in any pitch, and I was just like, this fucking kid. And I feel so bad.
Yeah, no, I get that. And it's very funny you mentioned Emperor's New Groove because, like, I think it could be just the nostalgia in me, but I honestly didn't mind those kids, like, very much. I think it's because they just weren't in it as much, so they're in, like
For a second.
they're only for, like, a few scenes, and when they do
Mhm.
act annoying, I think for me, it was more of, like, a sibling rivalry playful matter for me that I didn't really mind.
Mhm.
Although it does give me this like very interesting question here for you
Mhm.
is like what movies you could think of that have kids that are annoying but like you didn't mind.
Great question, because the list of annoying kids. And part of this is I have a synesthesia issue. I have incredibly good hearing.
Hmm.
Like I can hear everybody talking in a room at once. It's a pain in the ass.
Yes.
So the higher pitch certain things are, the less likely I am willing to be able to deal with them at all. I freaking hate it. And you're right, he is very uptony in his performance. And if he had done some more levels, which the director should have told him he's a child, he needs to be directed in this,
Yes.
it would have been way easier for me. There's a film called Six String Samurai. It has the worst child performance in it ever. The kid is not given any lines, he just screams constantly.
Oh.
And let me tell you what, if you can make it through that, then you are, bless you, you are a saint. And I hate the kid in Alien. Like, God, just let that small child die. But Super 8, I think the children in Super 8 are the perfect level of precocious
Hmm.
but believable.
I
And
agree.
that is a hard line.
Yeah, no, I agree. Consider the fact that like this is like I think it was like J.J. Abrams' first film where he directed kids into what essentially is kind of like a Spielbergian tribute in a way, and the way that
Mhm.
these kids were acted were very well presented. I
Mhm.
agree with that 100%. There was like another film. I know this will definitely annoy you since you brought up that with the whole like tone, a high tone wise. Because there are two films I could think of where I'm like, okay, there's one kid that's really annoying, and then the other one that is annoying but doesn't mind. Because like Jingle All the Way, it doesn't have the most annoying kid acting I've seen in a film. That to me was Vibrarium with Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots. There was like this kid in it that's just meant to be like an annoying shit. And it was the most torturous thing I've ever had to dealt with in that film that it was a miracle I even gave it like higher than a half star. It was-
Oh,
I
wow.
hated I hate the
I haven't
kid.
seen it.
It's not. I mean, people tend to like it. I mean, it has decent reviews. I get it, but like for me, I was like, I can't deal with this kid. He was one of the main reasons why I hated the fucking movie. He and he's in
Wow.
it for like the entire film. So it was just
Oh, no,
so
thank
it
you.
made it even like worse. And I'm over here just like, dude,
Mhm.
guys, like, come on, just. Um, but um, but another film I could think of that's done well. I know for a fact it does not go well with others, but I totally understand why. Was the Babadook with the kid that was like intentionally
Yeah.
annoying, which I know, like, with the high-pitched scream he does, it can be a little much for people, and there's sometimes it was a
Yeah.
little much for me too, but it wasn't in a way that was ear-gratingly annoying because it felt like, at least to the mom, like, she sees him as a representation of her father's offspring, essentially, like, every time she sees him, it automatically reminds her of her husband who just left them essentially and left her to take care of the child herself, and she just gets extremely annoyed of the child. So when there are points where the child has a breakdown, I didn't really get annoyed all that much. It was intended to be that way, which is very difficult to do, to be intentionally annoying but still not be annoying. So I feel
Mhm.
like, at least for me, the movie did a pretty good job on that perspective. Even though I totally understand if people just couldn't deal with that kid at all. I totally get it. That kid does tend to be much for a lot of people for that, but you get it.
Yeah, I really like The Babadook. I'm
Okay.
gonna throw that out there. I completely agree with your assertion on the child. I found the context in which that was done was intentional. And maybe this is like getting really deep into the concept of what is horrific, but women are programmed to respond to the scream of an infant in a very primal way, to the
Mhm.
point where cats scream in the same pitch so that women will take care of them.
Yes.
And so to hear the child scream in the Babadook, it's meant to be primally grating. It's meant to grab you for that reason. So I the context in which it happens makes it more like, oh no, this is leading to the story, as opposed to like with the Eisenberg film, where I can't even participate because this is so annoying. This single
Mhm.
performance is ruining an entire narration, as opposed to it is part of the plot moving it forward. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh.
I agree. And again, like, the kid does be annoying, it's only, like, in sparse moments. It doesn't,
Mhm.
like, he still does his, like, child things that are not annoying, just him just doing his own shebang, and that's pretty much just it, while we also just diving into the main girl's grief over
Mhm.
everything that's been going on in her life, so
Spoiler alerts.
yeah.
I would also be tempted to say Goonies, but the reason I don't say Goonies and I say Super 8, and maybe this is the influence, is I saw Goonies as a child, and
Mhm.
so I was watching children as a child. I've watched it again as an adult, and I don't find it to be terrible, but I know that there's so much of a nostalgia lens that I need to put that to the side. Whereas Super 8, I saw as an adult who fully hated children, knowing that I might hate this movie because I hate children.
Yes.
And I left thinking, those are good actors, and that
Mhm.
the cast had kids where it wasn't their first time. So, like, okay, like, kids can act when directed and when given experience.
I agree with that 100%, and there's not a lot of films that has, like, a group of kids that are not only, like, talented, but also, like, not annoying at all, so with something like Stupid 8 is like a dime of a dozen.
Seriously, and you're right, it is a testament to Abrams' direction and his love of Spielberg. I mean, Spielberg, we did an episode on The Goonies. He didn't direct it, but he did work with Columbus a lot on set and did direct some scenes.
Mhm.
Invested a lot in the kids becoming actual friends. This way they could act better, because it was literally every kid's first movie except for Corey Feldman.
Mhm.
So the director made efforts to help the kids tangibly become better as actors, better as their characters. And the kid in Jingle All the Way is barely in the movie, so it makes no sense to have done more work with him. But it would have made just a little bit of sense to be like, okay, don't yell in this scene. Like,
Yes.
your dad, you're disappointed. Give me sad and not just screaming.
Yes. Doesn't really make the scene all the more better, be like, "Oh, man, I feel bad for the kid." It's just more so just like, "Kid, just calm down, just level down, just go take a breather somewhere else." And if you wanna feel disappointed in your father for it, there's no shame in that. It's rightfully so, but crying about it, or at least, like, whining about it is not gonna solve anything. It doesn't really make doesn't make the situation any better, and it definitely does not make the audience patience any better.
No. And as a director, if you're going to include children in so many of your pieces, learn how to direct children. If you're gonna have dogs in every single one of your movies, you gotta learn how to work with dogs. Like you can't
Mhm.
just make that someone else's problem. So I do agree that that is a failing on this.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely say, like, it's like, I could definitely deal with, like, Jingle All the Way more so in terms of, like, child acting than, like, The Spy Next Door or Arbitraria, where the kids were in it, like, most of the time, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, can this movie end, please?"
The joy of this is that he's not in that much of it.
Yes.
Very true. So as we approach the very end of the episode, I want to ask you two questions.
Mhm.
First question, did you enjoy this movie?
In some regard, yes. When it does get funny, it does get very funny. When it does dive into like the wackier aspects, when in terms of the satire of commercialism or materialism of Christmas, and with Arnold just doing a lot of wacky things towards literally just any action he does to get Turbo Man at that he's basically just risking his life at this point just to get this action figure for his son that at this point it's like you're basically just I guess like father of the year at this point, just gonna risk everything. But and it and again, like I said, every time Phil Hartman is in it, he is the standout. He is always funny. He's always great, and it and just again seeing the joys of him just interacting with Arnold, just it's just like such a blessing. I'm like, oh, this is like so good. This is like
Yeah.
some fun in some regard. So in some regard, I did enjoy this film a lot. I did enjoy this movie a lot more than I anticipated.
Nice, nice. Would you recommend this film to other people?
Um, so yes and no, I guess,
Yeah.
because
With a caveat, I guess.
and the reason why is because, well, quite frankly, like I said, there's a lot of things I do think are generally good and charming. However, there are a lot of things of the film that I was not a fan of. First of all, I didn't talk too much about this, but Sinbad's performance, I when you bring up that his ad lib, it does make sense because I now understand because why these scenes felt a little drawn out. But the thing is about that for me personally is that while he isn't, like, inoffensive, he's not annoying, I just never find him funny at all. I maybe, like, chuckle, like,
Yeah,
once or twice, but every time he's in the
yeah.
screen, I'm just like, "Okay, alright, let's just get this shtick over with," but it's not, like again, not annoying, but every time he's in the film, I'm like, "He's just not funny." He's just not funny at all, and when he works with Arnold, I'm like, I barely see any chemistry there together. I just like, at that point, I'm just like, "Can we just get back to, like, just the shenanigans here?" Because when it does, like outside the shenanigan ordeals, it did feel like your typical kinda, like, kids' Christmas film that
Mhm,
was a little muddled, I guess, in terms of the not only the messaging, but also the satire, where I felt like
mhm.
there should have
The
been
intent.
yeah, I feel like the intent was there, but it wasn't, like, fully realized because
Yeah.
I feel like there should have been more of the satire. There should have been more of, like, the anti-Christmas com commercialism kind of ordeal with Arnold just being Arnold the way he is, but it just felt like there is something in here that is very promising, but it's not quite there yet to be an enjoyable film for people of all ages, especially like with kids in terms of like the whole messaging ordeal with the multiple Santa Clauses that can get a little confusing for kids. But for adults, like there are like a lot of jokes that I'm sure like adults would get, but then the kids will be like really confused because it is kind of in their face in some points and not like subtly put where like, oh,
Mhm,
they didn't like understood it, but like they didn't think too much of it. I don't think like I don't think like with Sinbad referencing Vertigo, kids are gonna be like, Dad, what's Vertigo?
that's just a throwaway line, he just kept talking.
hmm
Yeah, and it really undercuts the satire, the satirical message of the intent of the writers to have a huge commercial line launched with the movie of toys and things that you can buy. That really feels like, "Oh, what? was it really satirical? Because you're literally leaning into it.
Mhm.
And like that might be, I think there are too many cooks in this kitchen where everybody is trying to make this maybe another different version. Maybe this will be a great vehicle for selling toys. Maybe this will be a great movie for Christmas. Maybe this will be a great satire. Like
Mhm.
it just, I don't know who's driving the car, and so like it goes in different directions.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a little bit all over the place, and it's
Mhm.
what it's trying to come across as that it is extremely like muddled and unclear of its execution, in my opinion, with the film. But I do think like I definitely understand why people like this film, and I understand why people don't like this film at all.
Mhm.
And above all, it is like in a way kind of like a holiday classic in some kind because like I said before, people have talked about this film many times. They still reference the cookie line and the fact that like Arnold being in a Christmas film is like already like an interesting concept in itself
Mhm.
that you would think like, oh, Arnold's being Santa Claus, but no, it's not that. It's like he's in fact facing other Santas instead of being Santa himself. I thought with that concept alone, there is something there, but
Mhm.
I think like maybe with like a better director and maybe full on intention on the satire, I think the movie could have been a lot more stronger.
Yeah, and like I'm not about to rush out and see Sinbad do stand up, and I don't think you are either.
No.
And it's hilarious that Jingle All the Way 2 also is basically a vehicle for a stand-up comedian, Larry the Cable Guy,
Hmm.
because you're right. This film does not work on the fact that people want to see stand-up in the middle of this movie. What the fuck were you guys trying to do? Just take him out. He is not working. And in many of the scenes, everyone, if you're ad-libbing, nobody knows what to expect, and so you're just kind of hoping to get something good. Like, why not write something good? And I agree. In the hands of people with better intent, this movie could have landed better. But
Yeah, and I do think
it's still fun to watch.
yeah, and yeah, it is fun to watch. And I do think like the one aspect I think they should have done, in my opinion,
Mm.
is change roles with Phil Hartman and Sinbad. I think Sinbad should have been like the neighbor, and Phil Hartman should have been the mailman, where they're both like facing each other over a toy action figure. Cause like I said before, every scene they're in is very funny. So I feel like if there was more of that, make him the Sinbad role, I think the movie would have been a lot more enjoyable. And then with Sinbad, like, yeah, he'll be like kind of he'll be unfunny, but he's not in all that much. And yeah, maybe it will probably mess up the cookie scene a little bit, but like
But who knows what else we would get?
yeah, exactly. But I'm sure, yeah, like I said, Sinbad is not the worst part of the film. I do think he's trying. I could definitely see him trying, and like I said, the fact that he's like unfunny but like inoffensive, honestly, is kind of a nice change of pace in comedy films nowadays. Because every time I see people be very unfunny, it's like grating to watch. But I'm like, oh,
Yes.
he's trying, but just not funny. Okay, just let him do the
It's
thing.
not landing.
Yeah, it's just not landing.
It's funny to see that Arnold pushed so hard to give Sinbad that role, because you look at the movie and you think, "Oh, Sinbad was popular at the time, they might have been trying to market that," and thinking like, "Oh, Phil Hartman isn't exactly a big name," but like, they didn't want Sinbad. They thought he was bad in the role. They thought he tested badly on the screen. They thought he had bad chemistry with, Schwarzenegger, and Schwarzenegger was like, "No, I love working with this guy, and I swear this is gonna work," and it just didn't.
That's interesting. I
Yeah,
never thought Arnold was the one's like, yeah, yeah, Sinbad is the best one for this
I'm
role.
putting my foot down.
I'll put my foot
Hey,
down.
there are only 7 comedies in Arnold's body of work, so if you're gonna if you're gonna watch his comedies, this is definitely better. This is definitely within the top 4, so you might as
Mhm.
well watch it. It's got a lot of lines that are quoted from. It's only an hour and a half.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend this movie to people. I might be wary to recommend it to my friends who start taking out their Christmas decorations like the day after Christmas, who watch every Hallmark Christmas movie and who are like going to be slightly offended by this. Even though you're right, there are really no offensive jokes or really offensive, but like if you're really, really into Christmas, this movie is maybe not for you.
And I've seen some Hallmark Christmas films, and let me tell you, they are not fun to watch.
Yeah. This funny my aunt makes fun of my uncle because my uncle is obsessed with Hallmark movies to
Oh.
the point where he knows the actors' names and like follows specific actors. And my aunt is just like, if I have to fucking watch another one of it, and she ribs him all the time about it. I think it's hilarious. This also happened to my father because when we were children, we got Showtime and it had like multiple Showtime stations.
Hmm.
And this is on a cable box. And he didn't realize that the abbreviation for Showtime was SHO. The abbreviation for Showtime for women was SHO capital W. He thought he was just watching Showtime and that for some reason they didn't capitalize the H and the O. So for months, my dad was watching only women-oriented programming. And by the end of it, every night at dinner, he wanted to talk to us about how much he loved Kevin Costner as an actor.
Hell yeah. That's
So it's
great.
like, all right, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I guess I mean, with Jingle All the Way, I am glad I got to see this movie. It is way better than I anticipated. It's definitely the best film I've seen from this director. As of
Hey.
right now, I mean, I could definitely say
Yeah.
that. And I'm sure adults will have their joy over it and kids will maybe hopefully ignore the Santa Claus ordeal and just be like, haha, slapstick, very funny. And I don't know if kids nowadays know Arnold Schwarzenegger nowadays, but I'm sure they'll get some form of kick out of his weird reactions. I think they'll get some enjoyment out of it.
That is funny accent. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I'm glad I gave it a watch. I give this film a 2.5 out of 5. It was kind of it is closer to a 3 than it is a 2, I would say. But
Okay.
because I was thinking about this for a long time after watching it, because I was like, man, there's a lot of good things in that film, and there's a lot of bad things I was not fond of. But I could definitely say I was very glad I got to watch this movie, and I couldn't have done it without this podcast episode.
Straight up, I would not have rewatched it without this podcast as well. I agree with your rating 100%. If I had to give this a movie, I would give it a rating 2.5.
Okay.
If you could, I might say 2.75. You're right. It kind of ekes towards 3 because some of the scenes with Phil Hartman are fantastic.
Yes.
And you're like, can I just get a YouTube reel of just Phil Hartman scenes?
Yeah.
You can. You absolutely can. So it's close, but it's still closer to 2.5 than 3. We'll be honest about that. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and being willing to watch a movie that you were hesitant to watch and for decent reasons, and watching a Christmas movie in July. That's worth noting.
Yeah.
So nice on you for that.
Yeah, it did felt it felt like an honor being part of this episode, and I felt like an honor watching a Christmas film in July. Who would thunk?
Absolutely. Our first Christmas movie with our first person from TikTok. So there's a lot of firsts on this episode. I owe you a lot of gratitude. Many thanks, my friend.
Oh, no problem. I'd love to be part of it as a guest.
And that's where we'll end it, my friends. We're gonna kick out to another famous quote.
Oh, these cookies! I gotta get the recipe from Les.
Put that cookie down! Now!
Welcome to what is quickly becoming a very fun part of the show for me. I didn't think that corrections, omissions, and deeper dives would wind up being fun because you'd basically sit there and be like, I was wrong here, or we weren't totally right there. But the amount of information that I wind up getting and the weird rabbit holes I wind up going down are so worth it. So let's dive right on in for part 1 of corrections and omissions. Jingle all the way. In our first half, Brandon said that he believed Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is directed by Celine Sciamma, I hope I am pronouncing that correctly, was one of the first films to take a look at the male gaze from a female perspective. I didn't want to break into the conversation and go down a completely different tangent on unraveling all of that for what is really an episode about Jingle All the Way, about Arnold Schwarzenegger and Christmas. We can go back pretty far into cinema to find examples of this kind of subversiveness where women who are directors or writers are trying to point our eyes, our minds to exactly that. Let's look at the way that we are looking at what is happening here and how that is also a key part to storytelling in the medium of film. Just to give you like two examples going pretty far back, I think you could start with Salome from 1922. Now, technically, the director on that is Charles Bryant, and this is obviously a silent film because it is 1922. However, before the arrivals of talkies and subsequent formalization of film as like business, Hollywood was a town of like, well, misfits, many of whom were women. And so when you start to trace authorship of early Hollywood, you kind of have a certain amount of unknown factors. You're not really able to say who did what. I was recently reading an article that said about 75% of silent films have been lost, which I will do a TikTok on because that is some interesting facts. But enough evidence exists in the work that we do have that centers around queer-coded perspectives and things being made during this period that were female-oriented, that were trying to be subversive. You know, the Hays Code is not even close to in effect yet, so people are getting away with telling the stories they want to say, or getting away with. They're making art. And an example I would point to is Salome, an astonishingly stylish adaptation that takes Oscar Wilde's play into a like campy Art Deco dreamscape. Again, it's Charles Bryant who is the director, but if you look into it, articles, things that I have read say that the true creative force behind the project was Alla Nazimova. Now that's a Russian stage star turned Hollywood multi-hyphenate who worked vicariously, credited and uncredited, as a producer, a director, a writer, a lighting designer, and an actress. Now Salome was a passion project for her, who was 42 when that came out, and she casts herself as the teenage titular character. And that sets the tone for this adaptation that reimagines the archetypal tragic female fatale as like a powerful symbol of female sexual agency. So you take that, combine it with the costuming in this particular movie, which is outrageous. It's such big shoulder padded chorus girls. Combine it with Nazimova's own position within Hollywood's queer artistic circles at the time, and you have really a very good basis for making this film status as a landmark LGBTQ plus feminist work that just kind of takes a look at the male gaze from a female perspective. Another one that I would throw into the mix that's newer, because I've given you a silent film, so I'm going to give you a talkie. 1969, it's a film called Lion's Love. Really weird movie. Directed by Agnes Varda. She began her career as a photographer, and as a filmmaker, she was very focused on the power dynamics between the holder of the camera and the gaze, the person who is looking through the camera. This is a really great example of specifically talking about the gaze of the camera, the way we are looking at what we are looking at. Particularly in one scene, this is where Shirley Clark, who is an underground filmmaker playing herself, she's in the process of making a film and the whole thing is collapsing in on herself. It's not going to work out, and this has made her so incredibly despondent that she overdoses. Well, she's supposed to overdose, but the actress stops, turns to the camera and apologizes and says, "I'm sorry, I just can't do this, Agnes. I'm not an actress, and I certainly wouldn't kill myself about not being able to make any goddamn movie." Totally blows the fourth wall up. The director and the actress begin to argue back and forth until Varda walks into the frame and performs the scene herself. It's super interesting because it's a way in which we challenge the film set hierarchy, the powerful male director, the compliant female star. And it brings to your mind the way that cinema is entirely manipulated. It's entirely constructed. These are two female directors talking to each other, looking at each other. I don't know. It's very, very interesting. It's worth your time. Again, there's so many other films I could talk about here. Not to belittle Brandon's point, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is also a great example to look at from more contemporary work, but I just wanted to throw out there that there are a lot of work that you can look at if you want to fall down that rabbit hole. When did films first start their rating system? I did a really fun couple of videos on TikTok about the rating system, about the couple of questions I'm going to answer next. So, if you're not into a more auditory version of this, you can see a visual version of this that's a little more concise on TikTok, and I would love it if you did. But since you're on this podcast, I'm not going to make you go to another medium to get this information. I'm going to give it to you right now. The Motion Picture Association, or the MPA, they did drop Of America. They used to be the MPAA, but in the early aughts, they got rid of the A. It's not like they're worldwide or anything. There are different world rating systems for every country, and a few of them are actually government-regulated industries, but ours is not. And if you want to know more about that, I did a really wonderful episode with Trashwire. It's Alex at Trashwire, and it will be coming out in about a week after this episode. So if you're on my TikTok or my Instagram, you'll be able to see it there, and we really dive into the why of why that is the way. But back to what I was saying, the MPAA, they're the organization of major motion picture studios that rate movies for suitability to various kinds of audiences. They aid the studios in international distribution, advising them on taxation, works to prevent film piracy. They basically are they claim to be a nationwide public relations program for the industry, but if you, again, listen to that episode, we'll explain what they really kind of wind up being. The MPA originally actually had two more letters than just the MPAA. They were called the Motion Picture Producer and Distributors of America, the MPPDA. They were established in 1922, really right when that movie I was just talking about, Salome, comes out, so they're right at the forefront, by the major Hollywood production studios in response to an increasing government censorship of films, and that arose in turn from a general public outcry against indecency on the screen and various scandals involving movie celebrities. So, there were what were called decency laws in each state, and they would vary from state to state. And as a result, you would make a movie that, oh my God, it could come out in some of these states, but not all of these states. Wouldn't it be great if we could kind of make a one universal rule that would allow movies to be shown everywhere? Also, there were Hollywood starlets who were overdosing. Fatty Arbuckle had killed another star in his house, famously, in his apartment, famously, as a part of an after party. Not the intended part of the after party. It obviously went out of control. And so Hollywood starts to be known as the city of sin. And this is the attempt from the industry to say, hey, let's regulate ourselves because we will not be something that is enforced. Will be a suggestion. We're not a law, except in Tennessee. But again, you're going to have to go to my TikTok to know why. Whereas a government agency would be law, meaning that if you had enough infractions, you could be banned from making art. We'll never ban you. And so, we get the MPPDA, and they are the people who gave us the Hays Code, because their first director, former postmaster William H. Hayes, codified the complaints into a local censoring board and used producers' views to make what I described, a universal code, so that each state wasn't varied from state to state. It would be for everyone. We also spoke about the creation of the PG-13 rating. When did this specifically happen? I often say to people that I think I'm kind of right around the time that got bore into existence, and maybe I predate it. I was born in 1985. 1984 was when they created the PG-13 rating. And that's really kind of interesting because it was a response to Indiana Jones Temple of Doom coming out May 8th of that year, and then a month later on June 8th, Gremlins comes out, and they were both rated PG, because they're not quite R, but they are both definitely not great for a 6 or 8-year-old, let's say. Like the Kalima, pull the heart out of your chest scene, and of course all the Gremlins. It's pretty scary. So they got a lot of angry letters written to specifically Spielberg, who directed Temple of Doom, didn't direct Gremlins, but produced on it, so he still got a lot of the letters. He was very good friends with Jack Valenti, who was in charge of the MPAA at the time, and he said, "Hey man, we gotta do something about this, because I really don't like all these letters. It shouldn't be my job to regulate this for kids. I thought this was supposed to be a rating system that helped do literally this for the filmmaker." And let me tell you, Jack listened very quickly, because by August, not quite 8th, like August 11th of that same year, so a little over a month after we have Gremlins come out, the PG-13 rating takes effect. The first film to be released with the PG-13 rating, Red Dawn, comes out. It's not the first film to get a PG-13 rating, because that would be based on the submission to the ratings board, not based on the release of the film. Red Dawn is the first one to come out for audiences to see with a PG-13. However, it's Gary Marshall's The Flamingo Kid, which is the first film to actually get it. It comes out like closer to Christmas, and it's not nearly as interesting a film. So anyway, there you go. We asked what will get something a PG-13 versus getting it a PG, and that's not really clear. Something that's famous about the MPAA is not only is it an anonymous board, we don't know how many people are on it. They say maybe 8, maybe 13. They don't tell you what their specific rules are, because they felt that the Hays Code was censorship. So by giving a specific rule of what was okay and what was not okay, they would literally be censoring films. That being said, you can definitely talk to a lot of filmmakers who say that the board literally tells them what they need to cut from their film. So they don't publicize it, because then they can make it different for each film. And if you're really interested in the stuff that I am talking about right now, go see a documentary called This Film Is Not Yet Rated. It talks a lot about what I am talking about right now and how this enabled a major bias for films, especially films that featured female pleasure and those that featured any kind of LGBTQ views, non-heteronormative stories. It's the kind of movie that you need to see, but will also make you pretty upset. Brandon said that Haley Lou Richardson's character in Columbus was obsessed with infrastructure. He misspoke and meant to say architecture. The film stars John Cho as the son of a renowned architecture scholar who gets stranded in Columbus, Indiana, and strikes up a friendship with a young architecture enthusiast, Haley Lou Richardson, who works at a local library. Michelle Forbes, Rory Culkin, and Parker Posey also appear in supporting roles. Brandon mentioned the Scream franchise as having a director who started on YouTube. If you're under 35, this makes sense to you because you kept watching them and you know that there are currently 6 of them. If you're over 35, that probably meant that you screamed, "Wes Craven didn't start on YouTube!" The first 4 movies were directed by Wes Craven, who co-wrote it with Kevin Williamson. Williamson wrote Scream 2 and Scream 4. Scream 3 was written by Ehren Kruger due to a scheduling conflict with Williamson. Matt Bettinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillette directed Scream, which is technically Scream 5, but they just called it Scream because I guess nothing matters anymore. They did this in 2022, and that was because, well, Wes Craven had died in 2015, so he could no longer continue to direct. It's not like they gave the series to somebody else. They go on to direct Scream 6 the following year. Both films were written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick. In 2009, Gillette began working with Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Chad Villiella as part of the collective Chad, Matt, and Rob. Gillette co-directed, co-produced, co-wrote, co-edited, and worked as cinematographer on 3 interactive adventure shorts, The Birthday Party, The Teleporter, and The Treasure Hunt, as well as a found-footage horror short called Mountain Devil Prank Fails Horribly. The group became known for their signature style, which blended adventure, comedy, sci-fi, and horror, and they've received over 1 million views online. Very, very successful. They would go on to form Radio Silence with Bettinelli-Olpin, Villela, and Justin Martinez, and that group co-directed 10/31/98, the segment of the horror feature film VHS, which is incredibly popular, that premiered in 2012 at Sundance. Also, they would direct Abigail, the vampire ballerina movie that came out. It's actually better than you think. Even VHS, it's worth checking these out, especially if you are kind of a horror nerd. As for the Scream franchise, it's grossed over $740 million since 1996 and is available to stream on platforms like Roku and AMC. The success of the 6th one has actually led to a development of the 7th one, which will be directed by Kevin Williamson, the original writer of the first 4 films. So as much as I like what they've been doing, I am really very excited to see us go back to the original writer and the original story maybe a little bit more, and to give him the chance to direct. So very cool. I had said that the second Bad Boys 2, had a $90 million budget in 2003, which is 7 years after Jingle All the Way was made. That was actually Bad Boys 3, Bad Boys for Life that had the $90 million budget, and that was 2020. The second one had a $130 million budget, after the first one had only a $23 million budget. It was such a bloated budget that when you compare that to the overall profits for that particular film, Bad Boys 2, you can understand why they tried to rein it back in for the third. Even the recent fourth, which just came out this year, only had a $100 million budget. So to think that Jingle All the Way in 1996 had a $75 million budget is a fair amount. I mean, how fair do you say? Well, Independence Day, which came out the exact same year, was made on the exact same amount. Yeah, $75 million. Yeah, I mean, it's astounding. I guess when you pay almost a third of the amount, $75 million is the total for this film, $25 million went to just paying Arnold Schwarzenegger, you kind of mess up the film. There's not enough money for the film. Because Will Smith, Bill Pullman, and Jeff Goldblum combined did not make as much as Arnold Schwarzenegger did in Jingle All the Way for their roles in Independence Day. Ugh. For further clarification, between the success of these 2 films, Jingle All the Way made a worldwide gross of approximately $130 million in its initial theatrical run. That's about $55 million in profit. Independence Day made a worldwide gross of approximately $817 million, about $742 million in profit, or 13.5 times as much. This made it the highest grossing film of 1996 and the second highest grossing film ever made at the time, behind Jurassic Park in 1993, which grossed over $914 million worldwide in its initial theatrical run. Today, it is 98 in the highest grossing film for theatrical runs. The top 3 are really not any surprise, but their profits are Avatar, The Way of Water, Avengers Endgame, and Avatar the original, each of which made over $2 billion with a B, dollars, with Avatar the original making just shy of $3 billion. It cost $237 million to make and has a marketing budget of $130 million, which is twice the entire budget of Jingle All the Way. Like, it takes money to make money. I talked about the fact that there are a lot of extras in the parade scene, but it is not the largest extra scene. That is, in fact, Gandhi from 1982, the funeral scene. But I wanted to throw one more fun fact at you. Did you know that the 1956 Ten Commandments is the film with the most amount of animal extras, and that the animal extras actually outnumber the people extras? They had 14,000 extras that were people on that film, and they had 15,000 that were animals. What a hellscape. What is the name of the talking bear toy from Jingle All the Way 2? Brandon wasn't entirely sure about this when we were talking about it, so I just double-checked. In the 2014 movie Jingle All the Way 2, the toy that Larry the Cable Guy tries to find for his daughter Noelle is the Harrison Bear, a talking bear and the season's most popular toy. I mentioned that in Arnold's first film, his lines are dubbed over because he can't speak English very well, that the accent is too thick. I didn't say which movie that was. That's Hercules in New York. You can hear the original recordings on the Blu-ray Special Edition, or go to YouTube and you can see clips there as well. I mentioned John Cena stealing the show in an Amy Schumer movie. That's Trainwreck from 2015. I highly suggest that you check it out. What's the name of the actual real-life toy that Sinbad's character talks about wishing his father got him as a child? I mentioned that that's in there, and we're talking about his script was not written. He ad-libbed a lot, so he drew this from reality, from his own life. The toy that Myron references in the diner that he did not get as a child, and later said to be the most popular toy aside from Turbo Man, yeah, that's a real toy. It is, in fact, the Johnny 7 OMA gun, OMA meaning one-man army. It performed different functions, so it could be like he was a one-man army. The Johnny 7 OMA gun was produced by Deluxe Reading under their Topper Toys toy line and released in 1964, where it became the best-selling boys' toy of that year. The toy was marketed heavily on television, and the commercials went exactly as how Myron describes it. It's because it was from his real life, you know? The toy is obviously no longer in production, and as a result is a highly collectible item. And if you look it up on eBay, it kind of sells for like $1,500. I said that I hated the little kid in Alien. I should have said Aliens, as Newt is in the sequel to Alien titled Aliens. Was Super 8 J.J. Abrams' first time directing children? Brandon says that in the second part that he believes this was his first time directing children, and I just double-checked that like I do everything, and he was in fact correct. Even though he had directed a lot of stuff prior to that, this was his first film that focused on mainly children and had a main cast of children. Really by far. I mean, he had done episodes of Felicity and Lost and Alias. He directed Mission Impossible 3. He did a few episodes of The Office, Star Trek in 2009, but not children. Not a children-focused film, nearly close to Super 8. So he is very right in making that call, which makes it even the more impressive how well-rounded these children are. And maybe that's part of the reason why he approached them like full entire characters, like mini adults without being condescending or precocious. It's really a standout film, and that's coming from someone who really doesn't like children in narration. I often find that I just find it really difficult to believe that the 13-year-old is going to be the Messiah who saves us from the ever-impending doom and darkness of this evil force, when, like, most 13-year-olds I know would struggle to use the New York City public system. Just throwing it out there. But I digress. The children in Super 8 are very believable. Their motivations are very believable, and I definitely recommend you check it out. And that's it. That is a wrap on episode 17, Jingle All the Way. I hope you had as much fun as I did talking about a movie that I didn't think there'd be that much to actually talk about, and really finding out that there's something hidden in almost every single movie, regardless of whether or not you may entirely love it. It's got stuff. There's so many people and so many moving parts in the process of filmmaking that it always winds up being really interesting to me. And we'll continue to test that line as we keep doing these shows. Maybe we will finally find a movie for which I am unable to save, or a director, or an actor. We haven't yet, but let's see. Again, if you enjoyed Brandon, you can find him, liner notes, on Letterboxd, TikTok, and Instagram. He is very, very fascinating on all three of these platforms. Definitely follow him on TikTok if you're interested in music as well, because he does a lot of music reviews as well as film reviews. So you can find him on Letterboxd, get all that good film content, and then you can also find out about music through him. I'm not really a big music file, and I'm not even close to on the forefront of trends with music the way that I am with film, so it's really nice to have this available. I'm Movie Runtime on all of the things. I am gonna be on Movie Night Extravaganza. I'm always on Movie Night Extravaganza to some extent. They are my brother from another mother, if you will, my home away from home. Do support them. They're doing really great work. They always are. But lately, the episodes are heating up more than ever before. The guests are really awesome. I want to share that content with you. I want to encourage you to go there. On our next episode, we'll be joined by Rocky Calcetta, who you might remember from our Raiders of the Lost Ark episode. Unlike many guests who have taken the challenge, instead of coming back and challenging me, he's coming back for another challenge. He has not seen Midsommar, and, well, I really like that movie, so I'm really excited to get to talk to him about it. He does not like Ari Aster and very much did not enjoy Hereditary. So he simply missed Midsommar because he thought, this guy is not for me. But as a big fan of horror, he was willing to maybe be wrong, or at least be willing to watch the movie. So join in on that and you'll get to see how it goes. And finally, if you've made it to the very, very end of the episode, which you have just now, a special thanks to you, a special kudos. I hope your day is going really, really well and continues to do so. Thank you so very much. This has been What If I Don't Like It with your host, Katie Baldessaro. See you later, Space Cowboy.